The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The darkness comes first. Not the darkness of sleep, not the soft, heavy unconsciousness of a body at rest. This is the darkness between one heartbeat and the next, between a breath drawn in and the breath that never comes out. It has a sound, a low, mechanical rhythm, the bass resonance of a corridor that stretches a kilometer in either direction through the belly of something terrible, the hiss and pump of a respirator that is not his, that has never been his, that belongs to the thing that was once a boy he loved. And beneath it, barely audible, the sound of his own voice. Only a master of evil, Darth. He hears it the way a man hears his own name spoken in a crowd, the private interior register of it, the particular loneliness. He is not afraid. He stopped being afraid of Darth Vader the way a man stops being afraid of his own reflection. Too much familiarity, too many years of understanding exactly how the creature was built, and precisely whose hands built it. He had made his peace with this corridor long before he walked into it. The circle is now complete, the hum of a red blade igniting, the crisp, cold snap of his own blue light answering. Feet on grilled metal, the particular acoustic of a lightsaber strike inside a sealed corridor, that compressed, ringing impact that travels up through the wrists. Vader's breathing, unchanged and unchangeable. The sound of a man sealed inside his own punishment. And then, the moment. Not pain, precisely, more like a door opening, a sudden cessation of resistance, as if the Force, which had been holding something back for 20 years, finally released it, white light behind his eyes, complete and absolute silence. Then, birdsong. He comes back to himself face down. The first sensation is the mattress. He registers it before he registers anything else, the particular, traitorous softness of it, the way it yields under his weight in a way that the rough sleep pad on Tatooine never did, in a way that nothing he has slept on in 2 decades has come close to. He lies still for a moment with his cheek against the fabric, breathing, because the difference in air quality alone is nearly overwhelming. Filtered, temperature-controlled, carrying the faint ionization smell of a ventilation system, and underneath that, the ancient mineral scent of stone that has not moved in 10,000 years. He knows this smell. He presses his palms against the mattress and pushes himself upright, and looks down at his hands, young, the fingers unmarked, the skin across his knuckles without the network of fine lines that desert years had pressed into his, without the scarred ridge across his left thumb where a vibroblade had caught him in a slaving operation near Anchorhead in his 14th year of exile. His right hand, he turns it over, stares at the palm, carries none of the stiffness that had lived in his wrist for a decade, the old Mustafar consequence, the thing he never spoke of, the hands of a man who has not yet been through any of it, clean and unwritten and impossibly disoriently young. He looks up. The room resolves around him in the gray pre-dawn light filtering through a single narrow window, a bunk, a small desk with a battered datapad on it, a hook on the wall with a robe hanging from it, his robe, the right size, the particular drape of Padawan's brown. Above the bunk, a practice saber in its mount. The window faces east, and through it, the Coruscant skyline burns with the endless light of a city that never sleeps, and in the middle distance, visible if you knew where to look, the cluster of Senate District towers rising like a crown. Identify, Ben thinks. Assess. He is in Padawan quarters. The architecture of the walls, the particular curve of the doorframe, the resonance of the stone through the soles of his feet when he stands, all of it is the Jedi Temple, every inch of it. He has not been inside this building in 30 years, and knows every corridor of it as precisely as he knows the inside of his own skull. He moves to the small mirror above the washing basin. The face that looks back at him has not yet been burned into leather. The jawline is clean, not carved by wind and privation into the angular severity of the old man's face he last saw reflected in a metal panel aboard the Death Star. There are no deep lines between the brows. The hair is auburn brown and shorter than the old man's white fringe, cut in the practical style of a temple Padawan. His eyes, he leans closer, studying them because he cannot help it, are still the same gray-blue, but they are set in a face 25 years old, and what is looking out through them is 57, and the combination makes his stomach tilt sharply. He grips the basin, he does the arithmetic. He knows the date from the practice datapad on the desk, confirmed by the quality of morning light, confirmed by the specific way the distant Senate towers are configured. 32 BBY. 32 years before the Battle of Yavin. 32 years before the corridor and the white light and the absence of a heartbeat. He has been given back the beginning. He stands at the basin for a long time, thinking nothing, which is itself remarkable. Ben Kenobi has not thought nothing in 30 years. His mind is for these few suspended seconds simply blank with the enormity of it. Then it begins to move again, methodical and ruthless, because the mind is a trained instrument, and trained instruments do not stay still for long. The Radiant 7. He knows what the mission orders say on that datapad. He could read them without looking, has rehearsed their text in exile the way a man rehearses the details of his failures, searching for the moment when a different choice would have built a different world. He and Qui-Gon are dispatched for Naboo, the Trade Federation blockade, a negotiation that is not meant to succeed, aboard a ship that is not meant to land. He knows what waits at the end of that journey. He knows the specific sound of plasma gates. He knows the red tattooed face of the thing that will step through them. He knows what it looks like when the only father he ever had stops breathing. His knuckles, against the basin, are white. Breathe, he tells himself, in the voice of a very old man instructing a very frightened one. You have time. Not much, but some. Use it. He breathes. He finds the center, that particular hard-won stillness that years of desert meditation had built in him from the wreckage of everything else. He returns to it now the way a man returns to a shelter in a sandstorm. It holds. He straightens. He smooths the robe. He is still standing with his face arranged into something resembling composure when the knock comes. 3 clean, unhurried knocks. The knock of a man who does not waste energy on urgency because he has learned that the Force moves at precisely the speed it intends to move at, and no faster. Up, Padawan. Valorum's people are already circling. I've been knocking for 10 minutes. The voice, warm, carrying a patient exasperation underneath the warmth, the specific cadence of a man who has been both amused and long-suffering by the same person for over a decade. Obi-Wan has heard that voice in his own mind for 30 years, has run it through his memory on bad nights in the desert, the way a tongue runs over a broken tooth, compulsively, pointlessly, because the ache is proof of something that was real. He has told himself he remembered it accurately. He had not. The memory had not come close to the actual sound of it, living, present, radiating warmth through 2 inches of durasteel door. He does not move. He does not trust himself to move yet. He stands at the washing basin with his young hands gripping the edge, and something happens behind his face that he will not name, that he cannot control. That arrives with the specific violence of a feeling that has been held back for 3 decades, suddenly having nothing left to hold it. His breath goes ragged. He presses his face into his hands. Young hands, unlined hands, hands that have not yet dug a grave on Naboo, and he is silent for a long time, silent with the particular discipline of a man who has learned that grief too can be contained if you hold it correctly, if you let it move through rather than outward, if you breathe around it rather than against it. He does not cry, or if he does, the audio drama does not tell us. Some things are private. The second knock comes. The voice shifts, the amusement gone, the long-suffering gone, something underneath coming through that only ever came through when something was genuinely wrong. Obi-Wan? And that? The full name? The quiet concern in it? The way Qui-Gon said it like a question he'd been holding? Undoes the last of it and then puts Ben Kenobi back together in the same moment. He lifts his face from his hands. He wipes his eyes with his sleeve. He stands straight and rolls his shoulders back and pulls the training and the discipline and the long years of hard-won stillness around himself like the robe on the hook, and he finds the voice. 1 moment, Master. He hears the pause on the other side of the door. Feels it, even through the Force, Qui-Gon registering the quality of those 3 words and not yet knowing what to do with his registration. Ben opens the door. Qui-Gon Jinn is tall in a way that Ben had forgotten. Not just the physical height, but the presence. The particular weight of someone who has made themselves entirely at home in their own existence, who carries 60 years of living without apology. The long hair, brown gone to iron gray at the temples. The battered brown robe, the one with the fraying cuff he never bothered to mend. The lines of his face, earned and worn without vanity. His eyes, brown and direct and alive in a way that Ben had, in 30 years of exile, convinced himself he was misremembering because surely no one's eyes were quite that present, quite that warm. He is not misremembering. The eyes are real. The warmth is real. All of it is devastatingly, impossibly real. Qui-Gon looks at his Padawan, and whatever he sees in Ben's face in that first unguarded moment makes something shift in his expression. Not alarm, not yet, but the subtle recalibration of a man who has just received a data point that doesn't fit his model. He catalogs it. His living force sensitivity is already working, registering something, not knowing yet how to name it. Ben looks at him for 3 full seconds without speaking. He has rehearsed this moment, has rehearsed it in the desert, with the wind as his only audience, has imagined the first words, the appropriate words, the words a young Padawan would say to his master on an ordinary morning. He knows the lines. He finds he cannot say any of them. "I'll need a moment, master," he says instead, and his voice is quiet in a way that belongs to the man he has been rather than the man he appears to be. Slower, heavier. The accent unchanged, the timbre identical, but the weight behind it decades too old for the face it comes from. "I had a strange dream." Qui-Gon holds his gaze for a moment. The living force practitioner in him is already asking a question he doesn't have the language for yet. Then he steps back and nods and says simply, "Take the time you need," and waits in the corridor with the patience of a man who has never once tried to rush the Force. They walk together down the temple corridor toward the morning assembly, and Ben walks slightly behind, as a Padawan walks behind his master, and he memorizes everything. The sound of Qui-Gon's footsteps on the stone, that particular unhurried rhythm, not slow, just deliberate. The walk of someone who arrived at their destination the moment they chose a direction. The way the morning light from the corridor's high windows catches the gray in his hair, the weight of his presence and the Force, which is warm and textured and specific in the way that only the people you have truly known are specific. Not just light, but a particular quality of light, a particular warmth, at a particular frequency that Ben's Force sense has been calibrated to his whole life and has not stopped being calibrated to in 30 years of absence. The temple moves around them. Younglings in the training salle practice sabers humming. A Padawan he doesn't know by name, who in the original timeline was dead before she could grow into her face. 2 nights in quiet conversation at a corridor junction, not yet knowing what the galaxy is building toward them. The distant chant of morning meditation, from the creche level, high and formless and old. Ben does not look too long at any of them. He is building walls, careful and practiced, around the things he cannot afford to feel yet. He has 32 years to prevent, he has today to start. I had 30 years to prepare something wise to say in this moment, he thinks, in the private register that the audio drama carries alone. The corridor stretches before us, and the morning assembly waits, and the mission orders for the Radiant 7 are on a datapad in the dispatch office, and somewhere in the Senate district, behind the windows of 500 Republica, a man is waking up to a day he has scripted in its every detail. I find I cannot speak at all. Ahead of him, Qui-Gon glances back, not with suspicion, just a master checking the distance between himself and his Padawan, the instinct of a man responsible for another person's formation. The look lasts only a second, but in it, Ben sees the face of the man he buried under a tree on Naboo, alive and entirely unaware of what is waiting for him on that green world. But I know what to do with the time I've been given. He matches Qui-Gon's pace. He straightens his shoulders. He fixes his face into the careful neutral of a young Padawan on an ordinary morning, and underneath that face, a 57-year-old general quietly begins to plan. And I will not waste a single second of it. The morning assembly is held in the eastern antechamber off the main corridor, a high-ceilinged room with stone benches and a single tall window that faces the Senate district. 20 Padawans and their masters, standing in loose ranks while a temple administrator delivers the day's assignments, in the flat, efficient cadence of a man who has read similar lists for 30 years and finds each one equally routine. Ben stands in the second row. His body knows where to put itself. That is the strange mercy of it. The muscle memory of the 25-year-old is still present, still functional, still capable of directing his feet and his posture and the precise angle of his chin during assembly without requiring any conscious instruction. He can stand here in the shape of a Padawan while the rest of him is somewhere else entirely, running the same calculation he has been running since the moment he opened his eyes. The Radiant 7 departs at midday. Valorum's aide will present the mission in the council chamber at the 3rd hour. That gives him approximately 2 hours. He catalogs the faces in the room without appearing to. The reflex of an old soldier reading a room. Threat assessment, alliance assessment, who can be trusted and at what cost. 2 rows ahead, a Padawan he almost recognizes from the Purge records, dead at 23 during the siege of the Jedi Temple. Beside her, a master whose name he cannot place, but whose face he has seen in the archive holographies he spent years studying on Tatooine, trying to rebuild what Order 66 had erased. These people do not know him as anything but another Padawan who got up this morning and put on his robe and came to assembly because the schedule demanded it. They do not know that he is going to set fire to the schedule. Qui-Gon stands at his right, listening to the administrator. He is not asked again about the strange dream, but twice already, with the subtlety of a man who does not want to be caught looking, he has glanced sideways at his Padawan with an expression Ben cannot fully interpret, partly concern, partly something more curious than concern. The expression of a living force practitioner, whose instincts are telling him something his categories cannot yet contain. Ben can feel it in the force, faint but persistent, his master reaching out, touching the edge of his presence, and finding the texture of it wrong in a way that Qui-Gon cannot yet name. He will name it soon enough. The administrator concludes. The assembly disperses. Ben moves with the current of robes and footsteps toward the council chamber level, and he uses the walk to build the architecture of what he is about to do. Not everything. That is the first principle. Not everything at once. Not in front of 12 people whose instinct for institutional self-preservation will override their capacity for truth if he moves too fast. He does not need them to believe him fully. He needs them to pause, to suspend the dispatch. A crack, not a demolition. The demolition comes later, in a smaller room with one man who actually has the capacity to feel his way toward the impossible. He needs to give the council exactly enough to stop the Radiant Seven. Not a word more. The name of the gas. The name of the chamber. The mechanism, specificity is the thing. Anyone can report a premonition. Premonitions are manageable. The Council has procedures for premonitions, categories for force visions, ways of acknowledging and setting aside the imprecise warnings of the living force without acting on them. What you cannot set aside, procedurally, is a Padawan reciting the specific chemical compound of the assassination attempt before it happens. He walks, he breathes. He is ready by the time the council chamber doors open. The room is exactly as he left it. 57 years, and a white light ago, he saw this chamber burning, its high windows cracked, smoke rolling through the transparent steel corridors, the bodies of Padawans in the doorways. He visited it 3 more times in his exile, in dreams he did not invite, coming awake on his sleeping mat in the darkness of a Tatooine night with the specific smell of ionized durasteel and old blood behind his eyes. He is standing in it now with those windows intact and the morning light coming through in clean, cold columns, and 12 chairs arranged in their ancient ring, and the 12 people in them alive and entirely unaware of what this room will one day become. He puts that away, folds it, and sets it down. Later, Valorum's aide stands at the center of the room, not the Chancellor himself, never the Chancellor directly, always a layer of protocol between the Senate's business and the Jedi's attention. The aide is a young man with the slightly glazed precision of someone who has delivered formal missives his entire adult life and has learned not to register the content. He reads from a prepared statement. The blockade, Naboo, Valorum's request for the Jedi to serve as ambassadors, the mission classified, the Radiant Seven cleared for departure at midday. Mace Windu listens with his hands resting on the arms of his chair, his expression the particular reserved authority of a man who has approved 1,000 similar dispatches and expects this to be 1,001. Qui-Gon, at the center of the room, inclines his head. He has already been briefed on the broad parameters, has already accepted the mission in principle. His Padawan stands 1 step behind him, the appropriate distance, the appropriate posture. The aide finishes reading. Mace turns toward Qui-Gon, about to speak. Obi-Wan Kenobi steps forward. The Padawan bead at the side of his face catches the light as he moves. 1 step, deliberate, clear, not aggressive, not submissive. The particular placement of a man who has entered hundreds of rooms with authority and knows exactly how much space to take. Qui-Gon turns toward him, and his expression moves through surprise into something sharper. Mace Windu stops. looks at the Padawan standing where a Padawan should not be standing. His expression does not change, which is itself a form of expression. Ben speaks. His voice is quiet. It carries. The Trade Federation is going to kill us. One of the council members, Ki-Adi-Mundi, to Ben's right, shifts slightly in his chair. The room does not erupt because Jedi do not erupt. But something tightens. In the air, in the Force, in the careful institutional stillness of 12 people who have just had that stillness interrupted by a Padawan who has forgotten, or chosen to discard, his place. Ben continues, in the same register, unhurried, precise, the voice of a man who is describing a fact, not issuing a warning. The moment we board that ship and the landing bay doors seal, they will gas the envoy chamber. The compound is Deoxys. The specific chamber is the ambassadorial suite on Deck 2, standard configuration on the Lucre Hulk-class vessel, second pressure door on the port side. Viceroy Newt Gunray will give the order. His aide Rune Hako will counsel against it, because Hako is a coward who prefers cautious failure to bold catastrophe. Gunray will proceed regardless. A pause. He gives the room a full 3 seconds, because he has been instructed by a voice that frightens him more than the Jedi Council that this mission cannot be allowed to succeed. Mace Windu says, Padawan Kenobi, and the way he says it, precise and flat, is the correction it is intended to be. Your rank. Remember it. I remember my rank, Master Windu. No apology in it, no deference. The acknowledgement of a man who knows exactly what he is doing. I am choosing to speak. The silence that follows that sentence is the particular silence of a room recalibrating. Mace Windu folds his hands. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Ben completes it. Yes, I know the argument. I've used it myself. A beat. I was wrong when I used it. You will be wrong now. Ki-Adi-Mundi leans forward. His cartilaginous skull tilts slightly. Have you had a vision, Padawan? The Force can communicate through. Not a vision, Master Mundi. Ben meets his eyes directly. The living Force practitioner's discomfort with that directness is visible. There is something in the quality of this Padawan's gaze that does not sit easily in a category. Knowledge. Specific, detailed knowledge of events that have not yet occurred. That is the definition of a vision. A vision is imprecise. I am being precise. Deoxys. Deck 2. Port side. Rune Hako's objection. Overruled. These are not impressions. They are facts, waiting to become facts. Across the room, Yoda has not moved. His eyes, ancient and still, carrying the particular weight of 9 centuries, are fixed on Ben with an expression that is not skepticism and is not belief, but is something more like the face of a man holding a question he does not yet know how to ask. His ears are forward. In the Force, Ben can feel the lightest possible touch. Not a probe, not an intrusion, just the gentlest attention of the oldest living Jedi reaching out to understand what he is standing near. Ben steadies himself, lets the old man feel what there is to feel, because there is nothing to hide from Yoda's quality of attention, only truth, and the weight of it, and the grief underneath. There is someone orchestrating this blockade, Ben continues. Not for corporate interest. The Trade Federation is a vehicle, not a driver. Someone else is behind the wheel. A senator, on this planet, within walking distance of this building, has arranged the occupation of Naboo as a political mechanism. The goal is not Naboo. The goal is to discredit Chancellor Valorum, to engineer a crisis he cannot resolve, and to present the Senate with a vote of no confidence that removes him and installs someone more manageable in his place. Mace Windu, you are describing a conspiracy theory without a conspirator. I am describing the conspirator's method without naming him, because naming him here, in this room, without evidence beyond my word, does not end him, it ends my ability to stop him. And he must be stopped properly. He is holding his prepared statement with both hands, and the prepared statement is no longer relevant, and he doesn't know what to do with it. Qui-Gon has not spoken. This is the extraordinary fact of the room, that Qui-Gon Jinn, who has never in Ben's living memory declined to voice an opinion the moment it arrived, is standing at the center of this chamber, in total silence. He is watching his Padawan. The expression on his face is one Ben has never seen on it before, not in 30 years of memory, not in his grief-worn replaying of every conversation they ever had. It is not confusion. It is moved past confusion. It is the face of a man whose deepest perceptions are making a claim his rational mind has not yet approved. He is feeling it, in the Force, the thing that is wrong about his Padawan, the age of it, the weight. Ben does not look at him. He cannot, not yet, or the architecture of his composure will fail him in front of the Council, and he needs the Council to see only certainty. Suspend the dispatch, he says to Mace Windu, directly. Not a request, a recommendation, delivered with the weight of conviction. Not permanently, pending investigation. Verify what I've told you. Look at the Lucre Hulk schematics, the deck configuration, the chemical signature of Deoxys as a crowd control agent. Look at the Trade Federation's financing. Who benefits if the blockade succeeds? Who benefits if Valorum falls? Give me 48 hours, and I will give you a name. Mace Windu looks at him for a long moment. The Shatterpoint ability, and Ben has felt the pressure of it all morning, that quality of Mace's attention that finds the load-bearing points in things, is working now. Something in this Padawan is load-bearing in a way Mace cannot map. He turns to the room. The dispatch to Naboo is suspended, pending review. Master Jinn, we will need your assessment by the 14th hour. He does not look at Ben again, but his voice, delivering those words, carries a quality it didn't have before. The slight weight of a man who is uncertain, and knows he is uncertain, and does not like either fact. The aide opens his mouth, closes it, gathers his prepared statement and his bewilderment, and leaves. The council members file out in their own separate silences. Yoda is last. At the door he pauses, and in the Force, Ben feels that lightest attention again, not a question anymore, older than a question. The feeling of something ancient standing at the edge of a recognition it will take time to fully form. Yoda does not speak. He walks through the door, and the weight of his gaze is the last thing to leave the room. The corridor outside the council chamber. Stone and light, and the faint hum of the temple's deep systems. Qui-Gon's hand closes on Ben's arm. Not hard, not angry, but firm with the absolute certainty of a man who has been patient for as long as patience is possible. He turns his Padawan to face him. He looks at him, the way he looks at things he is trying to understand. The full, unhurried attention of the living Force practitioner brought to bear on a single point of confusion. What he sees in Ben's face is not a young man who had a dream. That much is clear. What exactly it is he does not yet have the words for, but the Force is pressing the words toward him. What in the Force was that? Ben looks at the face of the man he buried. He lets himself look, fully, for the first time without the discipline of grief managing the looking. Alive. Present. Confused and concerned. And underneath both of those things, underneath 30 years of missed time and unsaid words, the particular warmth of a master who has never stopped trusting his Padawan, even in the moments it made no sense to. Not here, Ben says. And then, very quietly, with the weight of everything it contains, somewhere private. Qui-Gon holds his gaze for a moment longer. The living Force moves between them, ancient on one side, present on the other, finding its way toward something neither of them yet has the language for. Then he nods, and turns, and walks, with his Padawan one step behind, toward the Eastern Garden. The Eastern Garden alcove is exactly as he left it. That is the specific cruelty and grace of the temple in 32 BBY, that it has not changed in the ways that matter. The stone bench, worn smooth at the center from decades of sitting masters and struggling Padawans, the narrow window barely a handspan wide that cuts the Coruscant skyline into a single vertical strip of light and tower and moving traffic, so that the endlessness of the city is made bearable by being made small. The smell of the place, stone and filtered air, and the particular mineral stillness of a room that has held a great deal of difficult feeling over a great many years, and absorbed all of it without comment. Qui-Gon used to bring him here when he was floundering. When the curriculum made no sense, and the other Padawans seemed to understand something he didn't, and the Force felt like a language everyone else had been taught from birth. Come, his master would say, with no further explanation. And they would sit in this alcove, and Qui-Gon would not offer solutions, would simply sit beside him, present, and unhurried, until the thing that was difficult became at least survivable. Ben chose this room deliberately. Every detail of this conversation is a deliberate choice. He sits on the bench. Qui-Gon enters behind him, closes the narrow door and settles into the space across from him with the unhurried weight of a man reserving judgment. He has been silent since the corridor. That silence has been its own kind of communication. Not cold, never cold with Qui-Gon, but careful. The silence of a man who has understood enough to know that the understanding is going to cost him something, and who is choosing to pay that cost on his own terms. He folds his hands in his lap. He looks at his Padawan. He waits. Ben looks back at him and understands, with a clarity that arrives too late to be useful, that he has been rehearsing the wrong thing. In years on Tatooine, he rehearsed the facts. The sequence, the specific proofs, arranged in order of increasing impact, calibrated to move a skeptical Jedi Master from doubt to belief in the most efficient arc possible. He rehearsed the words the way he had rehearsed everything in exile, methodically, in the evenings, with the wind as his audience and the twin moons as his only witnesses. He was prepared for the argument. He was prepared for the resistance. He was not prepared for Qui-Gon's face, 7 feet from his, waiting with 60 years of patience and that particular quality of complete attention that had always felt, when it was directed at him, like being fully known. He begins obliquely, because to begin where the story actually begins, with a white light and a body crumpling in a temple corridor, and 30 years of everything between, is to ask Qui-Gon to receive something for which there is no preparation. You approach enormous things sideways. You build the foundation before you place the weight. Tell me what you remember about Bandamir, Ben says. Qui-Gon's expression shifts slightly. An odd beginning. Indulge me. A breath. You were nearly sent to the Agricorps. The Council had listed you for reassignment. No master had accepted you, and you were past the standard intake age for Padawan selection. I was on my way to a solo mission and made it abundantly clear I had no intention of taking an apprentice. What changed your mind? The Force. Simple, unambiguous. The living Force practitioner's answer to everything, which is also always precisely correct. And you, being you. There was a cargo manifest on the transport ship, Ben says. 43 crates of unrefined ore for the mineral processing facility. 1 crate was mislabeled. It contained agricultural equipment, not ore. You noticed because you always noticed things that were out of place. You didn't mention it to anyone. You logged it in the mission record as a minor discrepancy. I read that record 6 years later, and when I asked you about it, you remembered it immediately. I remember the crate, he says carefully. I don't know that I've ever mentioned it to you. You haven't. Not in any conversation we've had in this timeline. The word lands. Timeline. Qui-Gon registers it without reacting to it. Holds it, turns it over. Says nothing. Waiting for more. When you accepted me as your Padawan, in the landing bay, you said something, not the formal acceptance. Before the formal acceptance, something you said quietly, just to me, while the others were still arguing about the logistics of the reassignment order. A pause. Ben looks directly at him. You said, I don't know what the Force wants with you, but it clearly wants something. I suppose we'll find out together. Those were your exact words. You've never repeated them to me. I've been carrying them for 30 years. The quality of Qui-Gon's stillness changes. He was still before in the manner of a man maintaining composure. He is still now in the manner of a man who has had composure replaced with something he hasn't named yet. His hands, flat on his knees, are not moving. His breathing is audible, just barely, in the way that breathing becomes audible when a person is working to keep it regular. Ben continues. He does not look away. You had a Padawan before me. His name was Xanatos. He was from Telos O. His father was a governor, a man with money and influence, and a particular talent for conditional love. You trained Xanatos for 11 years. You believed in him in a way that you had never believed in anyone, and that faith was the specific quality of it. Absolute, generous, unreserved, the kind of faith that becomes a vulnerability. Obi-Wan, you told me about him once, one afternoon in our 3rd year together. I remember the room, the small sitting room off your quarters, the one with the map of Outer Rim trading routes on the wall. You sat in the chair by the window and you told me the entire story without stopping, the way a person tells a story they've been holding too long. And while you talked, he pauses. This is the one that matters. The specific, private detail, not the facts of the fall. The facts are in the temple records, accessible, reconstructible. What is not reconstructible is the afternoon, the chair, the man trying to hold himself together. While you talked, you kept pressing your thumb against the inside of your palm. Here. He touches his own hand. demonstrating, just below the joint. Steady pressure. I think you didn't know you were doing it. I never told you I noticed. The silence that follows is different from the silences that came before it. Qui-Gon Jinn does not move. His face has undergone a change that is not dramatic. There is no outward collapse, no performance of shock, because Qui-Gon does not perform. What happens is more like a foundation shifting, something beneath the composed surface, realigning toward a weight it has not finished calculating. His thumb, quite unconsciously, presses against the inside of his palm. He stops, looks at his own hand, looks at Ben. Ben meets his eyes. He gives the moment the time it needs. Then he leans forward, and his voice drops, and he delivers the thing he has been building toward, the thing that is not a proof exactly, but is something that cannot be anything other than true. You died on Naboo. The words sit in the air of the small room. A Sith warrior, younger than I expected when I finally saw his face clearly, tattooed in red and black, geometric patterns, like something old in ritual. He carried a lightsaber with a blade at both ends. We were in the Theed power generator, a long corridor with plasma relay shafts, containment fields cycling open and closed, between us. He was faster than anything I had ever fought, faster than anything I have fought since. Ben's voice does not break. It has had 30 years to become something that does not break over this. But beneath the flatness of it, and the audio drama must carry this, must find it in the performance, there is a grief so specific, so personal, so thoroughly lived with, that it has become structural. The way a bone healed wrong carries the memory of the break in its shape. You were protecting a young Naboo queen, and a boy we had found on Tatooine, 9 years old, strong in the Force beyond anything the Order had ever recorded. You loved him immediately, the way you loved things the Force asks you to love. The way you loved me? A breath. The containment field cycled closed between us. I watched through the ray shield. I could not get to you in time. You let yourself go into the Force before I reached you, and your last words to me were about the boy. Train him. Promise me. I promised you. He stops. Qui-Gon has not moved. His eyes are very bright with something that is not quite tears, from a man who has long since made his peace with the idea of his own death, but who is looking at the face of his Padawan and finding there a grief old enough to have grown a whole life inside it. After you died, Ben continues, quieter now, you came back. Not immediately, not as I expected, but years later a voice in the Force, reaching across whatever it is that separates the living from what comes after. You had found something, a technique, a way of holding your consciousness, yourself, your specific identity together after death. It had been lost to the Order for millennia. You were meditating toward it your whole life, privately, without telling anyone. He pauses. Then, very precisely. Without telling anyone, because you thought they would dismiss it, because it was too unformed and too personal, and because the Council's relationship with the unprovable was not one that invited confidence. Qui-Gon's face has changed entirely. The calculation behind his eyes has stopped. In its place is something unguarded in a way Ben has seen exactly once before, the afternoon of the Xanatos story. In the chair by the window, a man at the edge of something he cannot fully bear, and choosing to bear it anyway. You taught that technique to Yoda across the years of the war that followed. Yoda taught it to me, in the desert where I was hiding. And when I finally died, in a corridor on a battle station so large it cast a shadow on the star behind it, instead of passing into the Force, I woke up, in this room, in this body, with your voice still in my head and your unfinished business in my hands. The small room holds the silence of the enormous thing that has been placed in it. Qui-Gon breathes out slowly. His hands are still on his knees. He is looking at his Padawan, the young face, the unlined skin, the Padawan bead, and through all of that, at something much older, something that learned to grieve, and then learned to function, and then came back. You buried me, he says. Not a question. The voice of a man arriving at a specific fact, on Naboo. Ben holds his gaze. Under a tree, on the eastern edge of the funeral grounds. With your braid, one breath. The sound of the city, distant through the narrow window. The temple hum, low and ancient, beneath everything. A long moment in which a living man finds the shape of a death he has not yet died, and sets it down beside everything else he has chosen to carry. Then he opens his eyes. Tell me everything. And Ben does. He speaks for a long time. the shape of the Sith Grand Plan, not as a horror story but as an engineer's diagram, each component laid out in its function and its relationship to the components adjacent. Palpatine. Sidious, the Trade Federation as instrument, Naboo as sacrifice, Valorum as target. The clone army, both sides of the coming war built and owned by the same pair of hands. The inhibitor chips, organic, biological, installed during the clone's growth on Kamino, invisible to any standard scan. Order 66, a single transmission that would turn 3 million soldiers on their Jedi generals between one breath and the next. The Purge, the Empire, what remains. Qui-Gon listens without interrupting. His face moves through things Ben cannot track fully. Something like grief, something like rage contained precisely at the threshold of expression. Something like the specific fury of a man who devoted his life to an institution and is hearing a detailed account of how that institution was used as a murder weapon. He does not ask questions. He absorbs. When Ben finishes, the silence runs long. Then, the boy, Anakin. He falls. The two words are not a question. They are the sound of a man who has already loved a Padawan past the point of wisdom, who already knows what it looks like when a gifted person walks toward a door no one should open. He does. Ben holds his master's gaze. He was not failed by the Force. He was failed by us, by the Order's fear of him, by the rules we gave him instead of the love he needed, by me in the end. I was there, and I was insufficient, and I have had 30 years to understand exactly how and why. A long silence, the longest one yet. Then Qui-Gon Jinn stands. He straightens his robe, that specific, unhurried gesture, the same one he made 1,000 times across the years Ben knew him, the physical equivalent of a decision being made. He becomes, in one motion, again the Jedi Master who does not allow the scale of a problem to alter his readiness to address it. The Force has brought him here. He does not question the Force's destination. Tell me what you need. Ben looks up at him, and the thing that unknots, somewhere behind his eyes, is not relief. Relief implies the threat was survivable without help. This is older than relief. This is the specific feeling of a weight that has been carried alone for years, finding for the first time a second set of hands. A ship, he says, and your trust. Qui-Gon looks at his Padawan, the young face and the ancient soul behind it, and the corner of his mouth moves in something that is almost a smile. Not warmth exactly, something wryer than warmth, something that acknowledges the full absurdity and weight of what they are standing in the middle of, and chooses to stand in it anyway. The ship is easy. A beat, the trust you've had since Bandamir. The ship is called the Meridian Passage, which is a name so determinedly ordinary that it functions almost as camouflage. Mid-range transport, well-maintained in the manner of a vessel whose owner understands that reliability matters more than appearance. 2 bunk compartments, a cockpit built for 2, a cargo hold that currently contains 4 crates of agricultural equipment left over from a mission the Council did not need to know about in advance. Qui-Gon's contact in the lower temple levels, a Duros mechanic who has provided the same service for the same master at least a dozen times before, without asking questions, hands over the access code, and receives in return a nod that communicates both gratitude and the understanding that this conversation did not happen. They file a flight plan for a routine outer rim patrol sweep, vague coordinates, plausible duration, the kind of mission that does not invite scrutiny because it does not invite interest. By the time the Council finishes processing the morning's disruption and begins to consider the possibility that one of its Padawans and his master have left the planet without authorization, they will be 3 hours into hyperspace and the trail will be directionally useless. Ben takes the co-pilot's seat as they clear Coruscant's traffic lanes. The planet falls away behind them, the glittering, endless, self-consuming light of it, and for a moment he watches it diminish through the rear scope with the specific feeling of a man leaving a place that has been both sanctuary and trap. He knows what is running under those lights. He has known for 30 years. Qui-Gon sets the navicomputer for Tatooine, files the false heading for the record, and then turns in his seat and looks at his Padawan with the expression of a man who has been patient long enough. You said the Naboo crisis was a symptom, he says. Explain the disease. Ben exhales. Palpatine needs to become Supreme Chancellor. The Trade Federation blockade, and everything that follows from it, is engineered to make that happen. Valorum is already weakened. He's been managing corruption scandals for 2 years, some of which Palpatine helped engineer from a comfortable distance. The Naboo crisis gives the Senate something visible and outrageous enough to crystallize that frustration. It gives Queen Amidala, who Palpatine himself guided into her queenship, who trusts him completely, a reason to call for a vote of no confidence. And once Valorum falls, Palpatine's name goes forward as the consensus candidate. He has spent a decade making himself appear harmless. He wins in a landslide. Qui-Gon is quiet for a moment. His mind is working. Ben can see it in the set of his jaw, the particular way his eyes unfocus when he is sorting information. And as Chancellor, he controls the Senate's legislative agenda, the military command structure, the Jedi Council's mission deployments. He has the institutional machinery of the Republic in his hands, and he spends the next 13 years very carefully making sure it can't be taken back. The Clone Wars begin in 10 years, both sides funded, armed, and strategically directed by the same man. The separatist movement is real. The grievances driving it are real, but Palpatine has been cultivating its leadership for years, turning genuine discontent into a weapon. Count Dooku leads it. His Sith name is Darth Tyrannus. Something moves across Qui-Gon's face at the name, fast, and then controlled. Dooku. I'll need to speak to him, before he falls entirely. There's still time. In this timeline, with Naboo intercepted, there is still a version of Dooku who hasn't fully crossed. But that window is narrow. And after the war, Order 66. Ben says it the way he always says it, flatly, without drama, the way you say the name of something you have lived inside. The clone troopers carry behavioral modification implants installed during their growth on Kamino. Biological. Invisible to standard medical scanning, when Palpatine transmits the command, every clone in the field turns on the nearest Jedi and executes them, simultaneously, across the entire galaxy. Thousands of Jedi dead in a single rotation. The hyperspace coordinates lock, the stars elongate, the meridian passage jumps, and the universe outside the viewport becomes the white tunnel of faster-than-light transit. And the two men in the cockpit sit in the particular silence of people absorbing arithmetic they would prefer to be wrong about. Qui-Gon says, carefully, why Tatooine first? Explain the hierarchy. Naboo is a symptom. We've already broken the original mechanism. The dispatch is suspended, the Radiant 7 doesn't sail today, which means Palpatine's timeline is disrupted. He'll adapt. He always adapts. But adapting takes time, and we need to use that time for what cannot wait. A breath. If Anakin stays on Tatooine, he stays enslaved. Palpatine has all the time in the galaxy to find him through other means. There are other missions to Tatooine, other agents, other paths. The boy is the most Force-sensitive being ever recorded. He does not stay hidden forever. And if Palpatine finds him first, or finds him later when the Order is weakened and the war has already begun, the instrument is the same. You speak of him as though he's a weapon to be picked up before the enemy gets to it. The sentence lands with precision. Ben recognizes it, will always recognize it, has turned it over in his memory for years, the specific formulation of a criticism that is also a question. I speak of him, he says, as a child who deserves a life his mother chose for both of them. A pause. The weapon part is what I'm trying to prevent. Something settles in his expression. Not agreement exactly, but the recognition of a distinction that matters. He turns back to the viewport. Tell me about the boy. And Ben does. Not the fall, not yet. Not in this conversation, because some things must be built toward rather than opened with. He tells Qui-Gon about the Force presence, the midi-chlorian count, the pod race and the engineering instinct, and the particular quality of Anakin Skywalker's attention when it was fully engaged. He talks about 9-year-old Anakin the way a man talks about someone he loved before the loving became complicated, with a clarity that grief, in its final distilled form, sometimes produces. Qui-Gon listens. In the Force, Ben feels him reaching toward the shape of the boy. Already, the twin suns fill the cockpit viewport like a warning. Tatooine does not approach. It arrives. One moment the planet is a pale ochre disk in the distance, and then the atmosphere entry sequence begins, and the hull shudders, and the world becomes a furnace. The sound of superheated air against the ship's undercarriage. The specific pitch of a vessel fighting a thermal layer that doesn't want to let it through. Even sealed inside the cockpit, through 2 inches of transparent steel and hull plating, the heat suggests itself. dry and absolute and ancient. The heat of a world that has been punishing life for longer than the Republic has existed. Ben goes quiet. He has been here before. 19 years of before, a before so long and specific that it has a texture, the quality of light at the 6th hour when the first sun crests the Junland wastes. The sound of the Mos Eisley Cantina 3 streets away. At night, the weight of sand against the door of the hut when the storms came. He knows this world the way a prisoner knows their cell. From the inside out, with the exhaustive familiarity of a man who had nothing to do but observe, I have spent 19 years trying to understand where I failed him. The thought arrives without permission. He doesn't push it away. He has learned that pushed away things accumulate pressure. Better to let them through. And now I am going to look into the face of the boy I failed, before the failure happened. He thinks of the last time he saw Anakin Skywalker's face. Not the mask. The mask was not Anakin's face, was the deliberate erasure of it, was Palpatine's work made physical. He means before that. The last time, on the black shore of Mustafar, with the heat of the lava and the sound of breathing that should not have been possible, when the person he trained lay in the volcanic ash and looked at him with eyes that had gone somewhere Ben's own eyes could not follow. I know what this will be. I am being honest with myself, which is a discipline. I know it will be the hardest thing I have ever done, and I have held a man's hands while he burned. Qui-Gon, beside him, says nothing. He is watching his Padawan's profile and understanding, with the living force sensitivity that has defined his 60 years, that the silence is not emptiness. He does not press. He will not press. He has known this Padawan for 10 years, and known this soul for 3 hours, and the combination is enough to tell him that the silence is doing work. The ship descends through Tatooine's atmosphere, and the twin suns close from above like hands. Mos Espa receives them with its usual indifference. The landing bay is dust and noise and the smell of burning fuel overlaid with something sweet from a food stall somewhere in the adjacent street. A spiced fruit product that Ben associates, involuntarily and completely, with the market where he used to buy provisions in his first year on the planet, before he understood the full parameters of his exile and began to make it habitable. He steps down the landing ramp, and his boots find Tatooine sand, and the familiarity of it runs up through his feet like a current. He does not pause. He leads. Qui-Gon falls into step beside him and says nothing for half a street. And then, "You know where you're going. Yes. We've never been to Mos Espa. No." A beat of silence in which Qui-Gon processes this and arrives at the correct conclusion, and files it without comment. Because his Padawan is navigating from memory, and the memory belongs to a period of that Padawan's life that has not yet occurred, and filing this fact without comment is, under the circumstances, the only reasonable response. Ben takes the third turning left past the landing bay office, then a narrow alley that cuts between 2 equipment dealers, then a broader street where the morning commerce is already in full operation, the haggling, the carts, the 3-species argument happening outside a moisture exchange kiosk. He knows the argument. Same dispute, different parties. Every morning, the territorial logic of a street corner that has been contested since before the Republic cared what happened on the outer rim. He rounds the last corner. Watto's shop, the junk dealer's domain, a cluttered, high-ceilinged space that spills out of its own doorway onto the street. The inventory of a life's scavenging piled in the particular disorder of a man who knows where everything is and resents the implication that he doesn't. Parts, components, machine remnants, things that were once other things. The smell of old metal and machine oil. Through the open doorway, before they enter, Ben sees him. He stops. 9 years old, fair-haired, dust on his cheekbones, barefoot on the stone floor of the shop's back room, his hands deep in the guts of a moisture vaporator that is giving him some kind of argument he has apparently decided to win. His fingers move with the certainty of a person who understands machines not as systems to be learned, but as languages to be heard. The specific, intuitive certainty of someone whose gifts arrived whole rather than assembled. He is humming, tuneless and rhythmic, the sound a mind makes when 3 problems are running in parallel, and the conscious part of it has gone somewhere quieter. Then he looks up. The eyes are blue, clear in the manner of eyes that have not yet been taught to protect themselves. The eyes of a child who has understood, early and specifically, what the world costs, but who has not yet arrived at the conclusion that the world cannot be trusted, who is still, despite Tatooine, despite the shop, despite the ankle transmitter under his skin, essentially unguarded, looking at the doorway with the frank, rapid assessment of someone who reads adults quickly and reads them well. Ben does not move. Qui-Gon, at his shoulder, takes a half-step forward. Ben's hand finds his arm without looking. A moment. He stands in the doorway and he looks at the boy. In the original timeline, Anakin Skywalker knelt on the floor of the Jedi Temple and told the empty air where Ben had been a moment before, told the ghost of the man who had failed him so specifically and so completely, that he hated him, that he had always hated him. Those words had arrived in the desert like a transmission from a war Ben had already lost, and he had sat with them in the sand and understood that they were both true and insufficient, that they did not contain what they were trying to contain. That hatred of that specific temperature is always love that has nowhere else to go. The boy in the shop doorway does not hate him. There is not a cell of hatred in him. There is only Anakin Skywalker, 9 years old, looking at a stranger with clear blue eyes, and the force around him blazing like a second sun, warm and enormous and completely recklessly alive. The grief does not leave. Ben has not expected it to leave. But grief and purpose are not mutually exclusive. He has spent 30 years proving that. He breathes. He moves. "Good morning," he says, his voice dropping to the particular register of someone who has learned exactly how to speak to a child without speaking down to one. Warm, unhurried, the voice of a man who has time for this, who is choosing to have time for this. "I'm looking for someone who might know where to find Watto." The boy looks at him, then at Qui-Gon, then back at Ben, with the rapid triangulating assessment of someone who has spent 9 years reading rules for survival. He's inside. A beat. Then, with a directness that carries no self-consciousness, "You're Jedi, aren't you?" "What makes you say that?" Anakin frowns at his own answer before he gives it. The small furrow between his brows, the face of a mind that expects itself to have reasons. "I don't know." The frown deepens slightly. "I just feel it." Ben holds the boy's gaze for one more second. In the Force, that blazing warm presence reaches out without knowing it does, the natural instinct of a living thing responding to others who carry the Force, reaching toward resonance the way a plant reaches toward light. "Yes," Ben says. He holds the weight of 30 years, and the specific mercy of what he is about to do, and what he is about to prevent, and he lets none of it reach his face, and he lets all of it reach his voice. "We're Jedi." Watto is behind his counter when they enter, the wings beating their habitual idle rhythm, the compound eyes already doing the involuntary calculation that happens in the mind of a dealer when any new being crosses his threshold. What they might want, what they might have, where the angle is. He is not a large creature, and he has long since compensated for his size by developing a very precise understanding of leverage. Every transaction is a negotiation, and every negotiation has a winner, and Watto has not stayed in business on the outer rim by being the one who walks away with less. He looks at the two humans in the Jedi robes, and his initial read is familiar: religious order, uninteresting, minimal purchasing power, and maximum procedural inconvenience. Then something in the younger one's expression makes him recalibrate. Qui-Gon opens his mouth. Ben steps forward first. He does not speak immediately. He looks at Watto with an expression that carries no visible heat, no performance of authority, no theatrical weight. It is the expression of a man who has made a complete assessment of a situation and is simply waiting for the administrative portion of it to conclude. The expression of someone for whom the outcome has already been determined, and the present moment is merely the process by which the outcome becomes visible to everyone else. "You own 2 people," he says. "Their names are Anakin and Shmi Skywalker. I am leaving this shop with both of them." The wings pick up tempo. This is the sound Watto makes when he is about to enjoy himself, when someone has opened with an absurdity large enough to constitute entertainment. "Ho ho, Jedi, very bold, very bold. But you got no." How that happens, Ben continues, in the same register without raising his voice, is the only part that remains to be decided. The wings slow. The quality of the interruption was wrong, not rude. Watto has been interrupted rudely his entire career, and he has a specific set of responses prepared. This was something else. The interruption of a man who is not performing confidence, but simply has it, the way a stone wall has mass, not because it is trying to, but because that is what it is. Qui-Gon, to Ben's left, is very still. He is watching his Padawan with the focused attention of a man filing observations he will need to analyze later. Watto crosses his arms, the position of a being preparing to be intractable. These two, they belong to me legal, all proper documentation. You want to buy? Fine, we make a deal. But you don't come in here and look at me. The specific quality of a command that arrives in the register of simple fact. Watto looks. What Watto is encountering, in this moment, is a man who has run this calculation for 30 years and has nothing left to prove and nothing left to lose. He is not performing authority. He simply has it. The way a stone wall has mass, not because it is trying to, but because that is what it is. Ben Kenobi spent 19 years in the Tatooine desert, doing very little except refining his understanding of the Force to a degree that requires a long exile and no distractions. But Toydarian neurochemistry is what it is, and he has never been under any illusion otherwise. He does not attempt to reach into Watto's mind. He does not nudge, does not suggest. What he does is simpler, and in some ways more effective. He presents the arithmetic with such precision and carries the Force's weight of certainty behind it so completely that Watto's own intelligence is left to complete the calculation itself. The way a man who has watched a sandstorm from inside it will tell you what a sandstorm does, and you believe him not because he is frightening you, but because the information is accurate, and he is clearly someone who knows. Watto is a businessman. His survival on the Outer Rim has required 30 years of reading risk correctly. The Force does not tell him what to think. It carries with absolute clarity the full weight of what Ben knows. And what Ben knows is that there is no version of this transaction in which Watto leaves better off than he is about to leave it. Watto reads it correctly. 2 slaves, Ben says, in a voice kept low and even, are not worth what refusing me will cost. You know this now. Act on it. The silence runs for 4 seconds. I got the papers, Watto says finally, in a voice that has lost its negotiating warmth. In the back. He watches his Padawan, and he does not ask the question that is sitting behind his eyes, which is, what exactly did you just do, and when did you learn to do it like that? He saves the question for later. There is always a later with Qui-Gon. He is a patient man. She comes from the back room when Anakin calls her. The boy has been in the doorway between the front counter and the workshop the entire time, close enough to hear everything. Positioned with the instinctive situational awareness of someone who learned early that information about one's circumstances is a survival resource. When the transaction's outcome becomes clear to him, when Watto's resistance collapses in that uncharacteristic, slightly bewildered way, Anakin turns and calls into the back room with a voice that carries something enormous badly contained inside ordinary volume. Mom. She comes through the doorway drying her hands on a cloth, and Ben turns toward her and stops. He did not plan to stop. He had planned this moment with the same methodical discipline he applied to the council chamber, to the hyperspace dialogue, to the calculation of what Watto's mind required. He had allocated it a specific duration and a specific purpose and a specific set of words. He had not accounted for the actual fact of her. Shmi Skywalker is 40 years old, and Tatooine has pressed that 40 years into her, with interest. The lines of her face are not the lines of someone who has been beaten down. They are the lines of someone who has chosen, daily, to remain standing, which is a different thing, and marks the face differently. She carries herself with the economy of movement of a person who has spent a long time managing limited resources, including energy, including hope. Her hands, even now, are the hands of someone who works. Her eyes, brown, clear, and in this moment swiftly moving between her son's face and the 2 strangers and the absent expression on Watto's face, are the eyes of a woman who reads situations quickly because she has needed to. She reads this one in approximately 3 seconds. Her gaze moves from Watto to Qui-Gon to Ben, and it stops on Ben, and stays there, and something about the stopping communicates that she has found the relevant variable. Not Qui-Gon, who is taller and carries the more obvious authority of a senior Jedi. This one, the younger one, the one whose face is too young for what is sitting behind his eyes. She says nothing, waiting. Your son is free, Ben says. You are free. It's time to go. 3 sentences, each one carrying its full weight without ornamentation, without the softening qualifications that people add when they are not entirely certain of what they are saying. He is entirely certain. The certainty is, itself, a form of respect. the respect of speaking clearly to a person who is owed clarity. Shmi looks at him for a long moment. Beside her, Anakin has gone absolutely still in the manner of someone experiencing something too large for immediate movement. The specific stillness of a child who has just been handed a concept that is going to take time to become real. His hands are still. His eyes are moving between his mother's face and Ben's, trying to read the confirmation in both. Shmi knows that something larger than charity is present in this room. She is not naive. She has survived 40 years and 2 decades of enslavement on a desert planet run by criminals, and naivety died in her early and quietly. She knows that Jedi do not descend from the core worlds to liberate individual slaves as a routine activity, that this is not the mechanism by which the galaxy corrects its cruelties. Something has directed these 2 people to this shop with a specificity that does not belong to coincidence. She does not ask about it. She looks at her son, who is already moving, the freed energy of him beginning to come back online, hands finding his jacket, eyes bright with something she has watched him contain for 9 years. And she looks back at the man in the Padawan robe, whose eyes have lived somewhere long and difficult, and she says, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Ben says. "We have a great deal more work to do." She nods. She is already moving. Qui-Gon and Shmi stand near the ship's ramp, working through the practical logistics. What she needs to collect, how long it will take, what documents exist that might cause complications, and what documents exist that will dissolve those complications. The bureaucratic anatomy of freeing 2 people from a system that built itself specifically to prevent that. Qui-Gon handles this with the quiet competence of a man who has navigated worse administrative terrain on worse planets. Shmi handles her end of it with the focused efficiency of someone who long since learned not to waste time on feeling something fully until the practical requirements have been satisfied. Ben stands outside the shop in the Mos Espa morning. The heat is already fully itself. The first sun passed its initial rise, the second 2 hours behind, and between them, the temperature climbing toward the midday that every creature on this planet structures its life around, avoiding. The street has its morning traffic, the carts, the commerce, the 3 species argument at the corner kiosk, still unresolved from his arrival. He stands with his back to the shop wall and his face to the street, and he breathes the air of a planet he has spent years wanting to leave and never been able to. She's alive. The thought is simple and it carries the weight of everything. Shmi Skywalker is 40 years old, and she is alive, and she will leave this planet today on a ship that does not file a return flight plan. And the Tusken camp in the Jundland wastes does not exist yet, and the chain that began with her death will never now begin. He breathes. He is still standing with that thought when he becomes aware of a presence at his left shoulder. Small, close, looking up at him with the unself-conscious directness of someone who has decided that a question deserves an answer and is prepared to wait for it. Anakin Skywalker has apparently finished collecting his possessions, which appears to have taken approximately 4 minutes, and has determined that the time for a preliminary interrogation has arrived. "Where are you taking us?" "Coruscant, for now." "What's going to happen to us there?" Ben looks at him. The boy holds the gaze without flinching. He is 9 years old, and he has been assessing adults since he learned what adults were, and he is not intimidated by the looking. "Your mother will be safe. You'll be trained, if you're willing." He pauses. He is choosing the next words with the precision they deserve. "Though the training will not be what you might expect. I'm going to make sure of that." Anakin squints. It is a whole-face expression, the kind children produce before they learn to minimize their reactions for an audience. "Are you going to be my teacher?" In the original timeline, the answer to this question came out of obligation, a dying man's hand on his arm, and a promise extracted in a plasma relay shaft on Naboo, the specific burden of an inheritance he hadn't applied for and wasn't ready for. He said yes because he had promised. He taught Anakin the way a man teaches when he is still carrying his own grief, thoroughly, competently, and at a distance that he told himself was wisdom, and that was in fact fear. Among others, yes, Ben says, "I'd like that." He lets that sit for a breath. Then, "If you'll have me." Anakin's head tilts slightly. He is reevaluating. He has, in 9 years, developed an extremely refined instrument for detecting when adults are being honest with him versus performing honesty, because the distinction has mattered for his survival. The instrument is running now, pointed at Ben with the full intensity of a mind that is always working on 3 problems simultaneously. Whatever the instrument finds, It changes something in the boy's expression. The formal wariness softens by a degree. Not gone, Anakin Skywalker does not let his wariness go entirely until it has been earned away over time, which is a quality he shares with every person who has ever needed it for protection. But it shifts. "You're weird," he says. Like, not bad weird. He frowns, the same small furrow Ben saw in the shop when he was trying to account for his own perception. "You seem really old." The observation is so precise, delivered with such total absence of social filter, that something happens in Ben's chest that is not quite humor, but is adjacent to it, the specific response to a truth spoken by someone who doesn't yet know they're being precise. "I am," he says, rather. And the corner of his mouth moves, and for the first time since he woke up in a young body in the Jedi Temple with 30 years of unfinished business and a galaxy to prevent from burning, Ben Kenobi almost smiles. The Coruscant transit lane into the mid-level landing approaches is heavy with early morning traffic, and the Meridian Passage settles into the queue without distinction. From the cockpit, the city spreads in every direction down as well as out, lit and endless and loud, even through the hull plating, the particular frequency of a civilization that has forgotten the concept of quiet. In the ship's small common area behind the cockpit, Ben is not sleeping. He has the logistical sequencing spread across the low table. Not a physical diagram, but a mental one, which he maintains with the practiced precision of a man who spent years with nothing to organize but possibilities. The pieces are: one council disruption now complete, one Tatooine extraction now complete, one Sith architect still in position, his timeline disrupted but not dismantled, one Count Dooku, currently in the temple's upper residential tier, still technically a Jedi Master, his departure from the Order 10 years in the making, but not yet executed. And beneath all of it, running in permanent background, Palpatine, who will be aware by now that the Radiant Seven did not sail, and who will be making his own adjustments, his own calculations, his own list of what has gone wrong and what can still be salvaged. The window is Qui-Gon. That is the only reason there is a window at all. In the original timeline, Dooku's disillusionment with the Jedi Order had been building for decades. The rot of the Senate, the Council's institutional blindness, the philosophical compromises that accumulated over 1,000 years of peacetime until the Order's ethics were less a code than a habit. All of this was real, and all of it was justified, and Palpatine had done nothing to create it. He had simply waited, with the infinite patience of a man whose timeline is measured in generations, for someone whose justified anger had nowhere productive to go. Dooku was the perfect recipient, brilliant, principled, proud, and already standing at the edge of a conclusion Palpatine could use. What tipped him over was Qui-Gon's death. Ben had understood this for years in the desert. Not from any conversation he'd had with Dooku. He had no conversations with the Count, had in fact spent several years of the Clone Wars personally attempting to kill him. But from the logic of the grief, a man who has been pulled toward the edge for a decade needs only the right weight at the right moment, and Qui-Gon had been that weight. Teacher and student in the complicated way of Jedi Masters and their Padawans, where the attachment the Order forbids forms anyway in the specific shape of the years spent together. In this timeline, Qui-Gon is alive. The weight was never placed, the edge was not crossed, and the window, narrow as it was, existed. Qui-Gon comes through the cockpit doorway, into the common area, and settles into the seat across the table. He has been flying. His hair is still pushed back from the headrest. He looks at his Padawan and then at the space above the table where the mental architecture is clearly running, and he says, "Dooku, yes, he was my master." The words are precise, deliberately so, not sentimental, but factual. Because Qui-Gon is a man who believes in naming the relevant information directly. He is proud, and he has been angry for a very long time. What makes you think he'll hear this from a Padawan? He won't hear it from the Padawan. Ben looks at him. He'll hear it from the argument. The argument is airtight, and Dooku's intelligence is too honest to refuse an airtight argument. His pride operates through his reason, not against it. If the logic is sound, he follows it, even if he hates where it leads. Especially then. Then, and if he doesn't, then we lose him to Palpatine in 10 years instead of now. And the Clone Wars happen, and the casualty figures are what they were. Ben says it without drama, because it is not a dramatic statement. It is arithmetic, but he will hear it. He loved you, and I'm going to tell him what Palpatine planned to do with that love." Qui-Gon says nothing. Outside the viewport, Coruscant is rising. Dooku's quarters are in the upper residential level of the temple's eastern wing, the tier reserved for senior masters who are present on Coruscant between missions, a level above the night dormitories, and 2 below the council chamber. His door is solid wood, actual wood, an affectation that costs more on a planet with no trees than most Padawans make in a year. Qui-Gon knocks. The door opens. Dooku is 63 years old and carries it the way a cathedral carries its age, not diminished, but reinforced. Tall, white-haired, with the physical precision of a man who has maintained his Makashi forms for 50 years without a single morning's concession to comfort. He wears his robes with the settled authority of someone who has stopped needing to present himself, and simply is. His face, when it registers Qui-Gon, moves with warmth that is genuine but immediately composed, the controlled warmth of a man who loves carefully and does not allow that love to show except in the most deliberate doses. He looks at Ben with the polished, mildly curious expression of a senior master encountering a Padawan in an unexpected context. He opens his mouth to address Qui-Gon. Ben speaks first. "Palpatine is Darth Sidious." The room holds the sentence. Dooku becomes very still, not the stillness of shock. His composure is too deep for shock to reach the surface quickly. This is something different. This is the particular stillness of a man whose most private calculations have just been referenced by someone who should have had no access to them. His expression does not change visibly, but his eyes, which are sharp and trained and accustomed to reading the political currents of any room, move to Ben's face and stay there with a quality of attention that is no longer politely evaluative. Ben continues. His voice is level, unhurried, the voice of a man delivering a briefing he has rehearsed 10,000 times. He has been in contact with you. Not directly, not yet, not by name, through coincidences that were not coincidences, through political moments that seemed to confirm your analysis, while positioning him as the man who understood. He is building a frame. Not the argument, not yet, just the frame. Making himself the person whose thinking aligns with yours, so that when the argument arrives, it arrives from a friend. "You are describing," Dooku says with precise care, "a significant accusation. I am describing what I watched happen from the other side of a future that I have come back to prevent. A beat. I know how this ends, Count. I've lived in the aftermath, and I am offering you the one thing Palpatine cannot, the shape of the plan before you are inside it." Qui-Gon says nothing. Ben does not look at him. Dooku looks at this Padawan, this young, composed, unaccountably certain Padawan, and the Force is doing something unusual around him. Not performing. The Force does not perform. It is simply registering, for anyone with the sensitivity to receive it, that the soul occupying this young body is not young. That the certainty has the texture of a thing earned over decades, rather than a thing assumed by arrogance. "Show me to a chair," Ben says, "and I'll show you the architecture." They sit. Dooku in the high-backed chair by the shelf of physical books, Qui-Gon against the wall, arms folded, quiet in the manner of a man who knows his role in this room is to be present rather than to speak. Ben at the center, not performing command, simply occupying it, the way someone occupies the center of a space when the logic of the moment places them there, and they accept it without ceremony. Ben begins with the pattern, because Dooku is an intellectual, and the pattern is the thing that an intellectual cannot dismiss. Not a single incident, not a single accusation, but the forensic architecture of 30 years of orchestration laid out in sequence with the clear-eyed precision of a general analyzing an opponent's strategy after the war is over. The corporate deregulation measures that passed the Senate in the last decade, each one minor in isolation, collectively dismantling the oversight mechanisms that kept the Trade Federation accountable. The series of chancellery crises, manufactured each one, traced to the same financial network if you followed the money back far enough and far enough back. The specific pattern of emergency powers legislation, proposed and failing, each proposal expanding the scope slightly from the last, conditioning the Senate's sense of what was permissible. No single piece is decisive, Ben says. He is too careful for single decisive pieces, but assembled whole, the pattern has one author, one consistent objective. Every crisis expands executive authority. Every reform removes a check. Over 30 years, The Republic's democratic architecture has been systematically hollowed from inside, and the only constant across every incident is that the beneficiary is always the same office, always the same agenda, and always, at the precise moment of maximum instability, the same voice offering resolution. Dooku is not moving. His hands are flat on the arms of the chair. He is working through it. Ben can see it. The specific quality of a formidable intelligence running the pattern and finding, as Ben knew he would, that the pattern holds. This is circumstantial, until the second vector. A breath. He does not want a partner. He has never wanted a partner. The Sith doctrine he operates from, the rule of two, is a predator-prey relationship wearing the clothes of a philosophy. The master uses the apprentice. The apprentice serves until the master finds something better. You are an immensely capable man, Dooku. Your political intelligence, your combat skill, your network of contacts, these are significant assets. But you are not the most powerful thing Palpatine has access to. He lets that sit for exactly 1 second. There is a boy on this ship, 9 years old. His midi-chlorian count is the highest ever recorded in Jedi history by a margin that makes the comparison almost meaningless. Palpatine has known about him for years. He will find him again if we allow the original timeline to reassert itself. And when he does, your usefulness ends. The man who has spent 60 years refusing to be anyone's instrument will discover he has been an instrument since the moment Palpatine first arranged to be in the same room as his grievances. Dooku's jaw tightens, almost imperceptibly, but Ben has been watching for it. He moves to the third vector, the one he has been saving, the one that operates not through Dooku's intelligence, but through the thing underneath it, the place where the armor is oldest and therefore thinnest. In the future I come from, your departure from the Order was not a philosophical decision, it was a grief response. He does not soften this. Dooku does not respond to softening. Qui-Gon was killed on Naboo, a Sith warrior Palpatine deployed. Your former Padawan, the one you trained and loved and released into the Order and watched from a distance, dead in a generator shaft, and you not there, and the Council already moving on to the next crisis before he was cold. Dooku has not moved. The room is very quiet. Palpatine did not kill him because Qui-Gon was a threat. He killed him because your grief was useful. Because a man of your intelligence and your anger and your genuine love for what the Republic was supposed to be, cut loose from the Order by the death of the last person who made it personal, that man was the perfect foundation for a separatist movement. He was counting on your grief the way a builder counts on load-bearing stone. He looks at Dooku directly. He already has, in the future I come from, and I am here to prevent it. The silence that follows is the longest of the chapter. Dooku sits in his chair and looks at no one in particular, and the force around him is doing something complicated. Old anger and grief that has been managed for decades with the precision of a Makashi form, and underneath both of those, something that is not quite hope, but is the specific orientation of a man who has been carrying a weight and has just been offered the possibility of setting it down productively. He looks at Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon, against the wall, looks back at him, alive, present. The former Padawan who exceeded him in some dimensions and never caught up in others, standing in the particular silence of a man who knows he is looking at his own grave in a future that has not happened. Something passes between them that does not require words and does not receive them. He would do that, Dooku says, not a question. The voice of a man confirming a calculation, not discovering it. The calculation had been running for years, refusing to complete, and has just been handed the final variable. He already has, Ben says, in the future I come from. Dooku is quiet for a moment, then he stands. The movement is automatic, elegant, the physical vocabulary of a man who makes every motion deliberate. He adjusts his cloak. He takes one breath, looking at the floor, and when he raises his eyes, something in them has resolved, not softened, not opened, resolved. The specific quality of a man who has been in the wrong hallway for 10 years and has just found the correct door. If Sidious is what you say he is, he says, then I want to be in the room when he is confronted. Ben holds his gaze. He has been counting on exactly this. Not Dooku's trust, which would have been suspicious, but Dooku's pride, redirected. The rage that was building toward the wrong target, given the right one. I was counting on that. The Meridian Passage finds a berth in the mid-level commercial landing district, Bay 47. which charges by the hour and asks no questions about the nature of your business or the composition of your party. Ben chose it from memory, the specific knowledge of which docking facilities monitored their tenants' comings and goings, and which ones simply processed the credits and returned to their own concerns. Bay 47 is the second kind. The landing master is a heavy-set Sulistan woman who glances at the ship's registration, takes the payment, and goes back to her manifest without registering that the 5 beings descending the ramp include 2 Jedi Masters, a former Jedi Master currently in the late stages of a quiet crisis, a 9-year-old who may be the most Force-sensitive person alive, and the boy's mother. The city rises around them as they clear the bay. Even at this level, mid-tier, neither the gleaming upper lanes nor the lightless infrastructure below, Coruscant is overwhelming in the way that things are overwhelming when they have simply never stopped. The sound of it, layered traffic, industrial ventilation cycling at its constant base frequency, the compressed human noise of a civilization that has been running at this pitch for 26,000 years, without interruption, the smell of it, recycled air and exhaust, and the specific metallic warmth of a city that generates its own weather. Beside Ben, Anakin is looking at everything, not with fear, not with the paralysis of a child encountering scale beyond his frame of reference. With appetite. His head moves, tracking, cataloging, absorbing, the way his hands had moved over the vaporator in Watto's shop, the way his mind had run 3 problems simultaneously while humming something tuneless. He is making the city his in the first 30 seconds of seeing it, the way certain kinds of intelligence cannot help but immediately begin to possess the things they encounter. Ben watches him for a moment and then looks away. Not yet, he thinks. There will be time for that. Not yet. Qui-Gon handles the arrangements with the quiet efficiency of a man who has moved people through difficult situations in difficult places. For 30 years, he has a contact, a temple lay brother named Qui-Gon, who serves in the civilian outpost in the Thicket District, a small, unremarkable building 3 kilometers from the main temple that functions primarily as a meditation space for Force-sensitive civilians who want Jedi guidance without the institutional weight of the temple itself. Qui-Gon is a man of 50 who asked no questions when Qui-Gon trained here in his younger years, and asks none now when Qui-Gon arrives with a mother and child who need a quiet room and a reliable lock and no official record of their presence. The moment comes at the outpost door. Anakin has been observing the adults all the way from the landing bay with the systematic attention of someone building a model of the situation from available data. He has registered that the large man with the white hair and the expensive cloak does not like anyone very much, but dislikes Ben slightly less than the others. He has registered that Qui-Gon and Ben communicate in the specific shorthand of people who have known each other so long that complete sentences have become optional. He has registered that something large is happening and that he and his mother are not the center of it, which is a position he finds simultaneously reassuring and unsatisfying. He looks at Ben as they reach the door. "You'll come back?" The question is direct, not performed. Anakin Skywalker does not perform vulnerability, does not have the social education yet to understand that vulnerability is something people sometimes perform strategically. He simply wants to know, and he is asking the person he has decided is most likely to give him an accurate answer. Ben turns to look at him. In the original timeline, the promises made to this boy were made under duress, made in grief, made in the specific desperation of circumstances that left no space for the deliberate choosing of words. They were real promises, real intentions, broken by the weight of a war nobody survived cleanly. This is different. This is a small, specific, entirely achievable thing. Yes, Ben says, nothing else. No qualification, no elaboration. I promise. Anakin looks at him for another second with those unguarded blue eyes, running the assessment he is always running, and then nods, one clean, satisfied nod, and turns and follows his mother through the door. Ben looks at the closed door for a moment. Then he turns to the work. Dooku's political network is extensive and carefully maintained. Over the last decade of his increasing disillusionment, he has cultivated contacts across the Senate's middle tier, aides, analysts, junior clerks who have access to scheduling records and communication logs, and the administrative infrastructure through which the Republic's actual business flows. None of them know they are part of a network. Each believes they are simply someone Dooku has occasion to consult from time to time. This is precise and deliberate. A network that knows it is a network is a liability. a collection of individuals who each believe they have a private relationship with an influential Jedi Master, is an asset. He calls 3 of them, from the outpost's communications alcove, in conversations that last between 2 and 4 minutes each and produce, in aggregate, the following. The Trade Federation blockade of Naboo is ongoing. The crisis in the Senate is unfolding. Without the Jedi mission, without Queen Amidala's arrival on Coruscant, the vote of no-confidence mechanism has not been triggered. The political pressure is building, but the detonation point has not been reached. And Palpatine, Senator Palpatine, the concerned representative of the occupied homeworld, the avuncular statesman quietly devastated by the crisis afflicting his people, is in an unusual position for a man who is never in unusual positions. His timeline has slipped. The Radiant 7 did not sail. 2 Jedi he expected to be aboard a Federation ship are not aboard a Federation ship, and his agents in the Temple's administrative layer have been pulling records for 12 hours and arriving at answers that do not satisfy. He is making inquiries. The inquiries are calm, patient, expressed in the language of a politician seeking information about a procedural anomaly. Underneath the language, Ben knows they are the inquiries of a man who has run a plan for 30 years without a single unaccounted-for variable and has just encountered one. 12 to 18 hours, Ben says, when Dooku delivers the summary, before he either adapts fully or decides to run. We move tonight. It takes him 4 minutes. The first 2 he spends considering the language, the precise register of it, how much to reveal, how much to withhold, where the bait sits inside the diplomatic packaging. The message, when finished, is 8 sentences long. It is formatted as a formal Jedi request for a confidential meeting regarding the Naboo situation. It acknowledges the sensitivity of the matter. It expresses, in the measured language of institutional protocol, the hope that the senator's schedule might accommodate an evening consultation. It provides no information about who else will be present. It is, on the surface, entirely ordinary. Dooku reads it over Ben's shoulder. His expression does not change, but something in the quality of his attention sharpens. He'll see through this. Of course he will. Ben sends it. I want him to. Dooku straightens. He is processing. You want him to arrive already calculating. A Palpatine who is surprised in place, encountered cold without warning, is the most dangerous version of him. He has had 1,000 years of Sith preparation for that specific scenario. The sudden exposure, the cornered animal response. He is extraordinary when cornered without time to choose his ground. Ben turns from the terminal. But a Palpatine who has had 4 hours to think, who arrives believing he is walking into a situation he has already mapped. That Palpatine is predictable. His confidence becomes a constraint. His ego will not allow him to believe it is a trap he cannot manage. That is a sophisticated understanding of his psychology, Dooku says, with the measured precision of a man who is genuinely considering the analysis. For someone who claims never to have met him, I have been living with his consequences for 30 years. Ben looks at him directly. You know a person that way. Dooku holds his gaze for a moment, then, very slightly, nods. The reply comes inside an hour. The senator of Naboo, deeply concerned, as all Naboo citizens must be, about the ongoing crisis, finds upon review that a window exists in his evening schedule. The situation is too important for procedural delay. His aide will forward the protocol details. He looks forward to consulting with the Jedi on this most pressing matter. Qui-Gon reads the reply over Ben's shoulder. His voice, when he speaks, is quiet. He's coming. He's coming. Ben closes the terminal. Get some rest. What comes next will require everything we have. The outpost's upper floor has 3 small rooms. They settle into them in the early evening with the unspoken understanding of soldiers before an engagement. The particular economy of rest that is not sleep, that is the body doing what it can for the hours available, because the hours available are finite. Dooku takes the room at the end of the hall. Through the thin wall, at intervals, the sound of a lightsaber moving through a form. Slow, deliberate, the unhurried rhythm of Makashi's first positions, not warming up, thinking. Dooku has always thought with his body, has always processed uncertainty through the physical language of forms. And what he is thinking through now is large enough to require the full sequence. The lightsaber hum in the small room is the sound of a man arriving, form by form, at a decision he has already made but has not yet finished becoming certain of. Ben, in the middle room, does not meditate. He sits at the narrow window and looks at Coruscant at night. The same skyline, the same Senate District towers, the same endless vertical rivers of traffic. This morning he sat at a different window in this same city and looked at this same skyline from the perspective of a 25-year-old who had woken up in his own past. That was one lifetime ago. He makes the list, not on paper, not on a terminal, in his head, where he has maintained lists for 19 years with the precision of a man who cannot afford to forget things and has no one to remember them with him. The sequence of tomorrow's confrontation, the arrival, the framing, the specific opening sentence, the emotional architecture of the unmasking, the fulcrum points, the moments where Palpatine's mask is most likely to slip, where the calculation beneath the performance will become briefly visible. The contingencies, what happens if Palpatine moves early, if he deploys something unexpected, if the confrontation becomes the duel before it is finished being the exposure. The apartment at 500 Republica, he has never been inside it. He is working from long-held inference, from what he knows of the building's layout, from what he knows of Palpatine's specific preference for furniture arrangement as a form of power management, the desk positioned to command the room, the windows at his back, the chair placement that ensures every visitor arrives in a position of slight physical disadvantage. He is reconstructing a battle space from logic and memory and the specific knowledge of an opponent's habits, which is an unreliable method, and the only method he has. He holds the uncertainty. He does not resolve it, because it does not resolve. He sets it beside the plan and includes it in the accounting. Qui-Gon's footsteps in the hall, the particular pattern of them, that unhurried deliberateness, never rushing the arrival, is something Ben has been hearing for years in the echo chamber of his own memory, and hearing it now in the actual physical world produces a response that he registers and does not examine too closely. "I've already eaten," he says, without turning from the window. A pause. Then the door opens, then the sound of Qui-Gon settling into the chair on the other side of the window, not across the room, beside him in the specific proximity of someone choosing company over space. Ben does not say anything. Qui-Gon does not say anything. Below them, Coruscant continues its perpetual conversation with itself. The traffic streams. The towers blaze. Somewhere in the Senate District, 3 kilometers north, a man is sitting in a suite of understated luxury reviewing the evening's communications and constructing his response to a situation that has, for the first time in his long career, not developed as intended. Here, above the mid-level landing district, in a small outpost room with a narrow window, 2 people who have been through 30 years of separation in 2 different directions sit in the silence that is only available to people who have known each other long enough to have stopped needing to fill it. Like nothing has changed. Like everything has. The city hums beneath them, indifferent and enormous, and the night moves toward morning, and tomorrow begins. 500 Republica does not announce itself the way powerful buildings sometimes do. No aggression in its architecture, no display. It simply stands. Clean vertical lines of expensive stone, lit from beneath so that the tower appears to grow upward from its own light, rather than from the city around it. The lobby carries the particular chill of a space maintained at a temperature calibrated for comfort rather than necessity, the subtle luxury of a building that controls its own weather as a matter of course. The security staff at the entrance desk are professional in the manner of people who have spent careers distinguishing between the expected and the alarming, and have learned to express neither. 3 Jedi at this hour, requesting access to a senator who is at the center of the Republic's current political crisis. This is unusual. It is also pre-authorized the clearance already logged in the desk terminal when they arrive. The senior guard checks the registration, checks their faces, checks the registration again with the minor thoroughness of a man who follows procedure because procedure has never yet failed him, and waves them through. They are expected. That is the important thing. They are expected. The lift ascends. It is a small space, mirrored walls, soft overhead light, the faint harmonic hum of the vertical propulsion system. Ben stands at the center of it, Qui-Gon to his left, Dooku to his right, and for a moment the 3 of them simply rise together through the building in the focused silence of people who have finished talking and begun inhabiting what comes next. There is nothing more to plan. The plan is complete. What exists now is the execution, and execution has its own quality of attention, narrower than strategy, entirely present, the mind clearing itself of everything except the immediate sequence of what must happen. The floors count upward on the display panel. 42, 43, 44. Ben speaks without looking at either of them. His voice is level and carries just far enough to be heard. Let me speak first. If I tell either of you to step back, you step back immediately. No hesitation, no judgment call. The goal is capture, not death. 46. 47. Death makes him a martyr. His apparatus, the network, the agents, the financial infrastructure, survives a dead Palpatine and finds another vehicle. It has survived worse setbacks than losing a single operative, even the central one. We need him in Senate custody. Alive, exposed, his full plan documented and entered into the public record. Alive and in chains is worth 100 times more than dead. 50. The lift stops, the doors open. Qui-Gon and Dooku say nothing. They have already discussed this. They have already agreed. The agreement is in the quality of the silence between them, in the way they step out of the lift with the settled, purposeful movement of people who have arrived at the place they set out for. The senator's aide, a young human man with the precise posture of someone trained to communicate competence through physical presentation, meets them at the corridor junction and guides them to the salon with the practiced smoothness of a person who has escorted important visitors to important meetings many times, and understands that his function in these moments is to be invisible. He opens the door, he steps aside, he closes it behind them without sound. The room is everything Ben reconstructed from long-held inference, and everything the inference missed. Real wood furniture, not the veneer approximation used by people who want the appearance of wealth, but actual timber, dense and warm-grained, the kind that costs what it costs because it comes from somewhere that has trees. A low table set with refreshments, a slender decanter, small cups, fruit arranged with the artless precision of something that took considerable effort. The windows, floor-to-ceiling transparasteel, overlooking the Senate district, the great dome of the Republic legislature, lit against the night sky like something enormous held very carefully in place. The chair arrangement, 2 seats angled toward a third, the third positioned with its back to the view, so that whoever sits in it will be silhouetted against the light while their guests squint slightly into it. A small, deliberate, entirely characteristic detail. Palpatine is not sitting. He stands near the window in his senatorial robes, deep burgundy, immaculate, with the posture of a man who has been pacing and stopped when he heard the door. His face is the face Ben has been looking at in his own memory for 30 years. The mild features, the soft eyes, the expression of a man who finds the world's problems genuinely saddening and genuinely believes himself equipped to address them. He is 63 years old and looks 50, and the specific quality of his presence in the Force is, as it has always been, for 30 years, to every Jedi who ever stood near him, essentially nothing. A void wearing a warm expression. He greets Qui-Gon first. Master Jinn. Warmth, familiarity, the ease of a professional relationship with genuine texture in it. I'm relieved you're here. The situation on Naboo is... Something moves in his expression, the practiced ease of a man encountering someone he has been carefully cultivating, the specific warmth of a gardener checking on a plant he expects to harvest. Count, I hadn't expected. He turns to Ben, the benign attention of a senior figure acknowledging a junior one, the dismissive warmth of a man who has already assessed the Padawan and filed him as background. Ben looks at him. He looks at the face of the man who ended the Republic, murdered the Jedi Order, enslaved the galaxy, engineered the birth of Darth Vader, and arranged with the patience and precision of someone whose timeline is measured in decades rather than years. For every person Ben has ever loved to suffer or die, or both. He looks at this face and he finds, in the very center of himself, a stillness so complete it has its own quality of sound. He has been waiting for this moment for 30 years. He finds he does not need it to be large. Good evening, Darth Sidious. The room changes, not visibly, not in any observable physical way. The furniture does not move, the lights do not flicker, no one raises a weapon. But the specific quality of the air shifts. The way the air in a room shifts when something that has been held in suspension is suddenly released. And Palpatine's face goes through 3 things in the span of a second. The first, surprise. Genuine, absolute, and devastating, because it is not supposed to exist in this face. A micro-expression, gone in the time it takes to blink, but present, the specific involuntary contraction of someone whose certainty has been punctured. Ben has known this face his entire life without ever seeing that expression on it. The sight of it, for one fraction of a second, is the most frightening thing in the room. The second, recovery. The politician's reflex, 30 years of practiced deception snapping back into position. The face resolves into gentle confusion, the expression of a man who has misheard something and is giving the speaker the grace of an opportunity to clarify. "I'm afraid I don't." "Order 66, Ben says. He does not raise his voice. He does not lean forward. He stands in the center of the room with his hands open at his sides, and his voice at the same level it has held since the lift, and he speaks with the flat, operational precision of a man delivering a briefing. The clone troopers currently growing on Camino carry inhibitor biochips installed during embryonic development. Organic, invisible to standard medical scanning. When a specific command is transmitted, every clone trooper in the field will turn on their Jedi generals and execute them simultaneously. The command is designated Order 66. The transmission will come from you. It will take less than 12 hours to reduce the Jedi Order from 10,000 to a few dozen. It has been maintained for decades, against every pressure. I'm afraid I don't know what. The specific conversation, Ben continues. Unchanged. Your senatorial office, 10 years from now. A young Jedi Knight named Anakin Skywalker, alone with you at night, receiving the one argument that would break him. That the dark side has the power to prevent death. That you can teach it to him. That the price is killing the Jedi. The conversation that no Jedi survived to witness. The one that should have been impossible to know. A beat. I know it because I have been living in its consequences for 30 years. Shall I continue? We have the time. The third thing happens now. The politician's recovery abandons the field. Not all at once. Palpatine is too controlled for all at once. What happens is more like a tide going out. The warmth first, draining from the expression, leaving something cooler in its place. Then the performance of concern, the manufactured anxiety about the crisis, the careful construction of an avuncular man of moderate power, all of it receding, all of it revealing by its absence what was underneath it for 1,000 years. The eyes do not change. The eyes were always the tell, for anyone with the training to read them, always too still, always too patient, always carrying the specific quality of something that has been watching for much longer than the face suggests. But now the rest of the face catches up to what the eyes have been all along. 2 Death Stars, Ben says. The first one destroyed because the man you enslaved to build it hid a wound inside it. A wound you never knew existed until it tore your station apart. The second one, the one you are inside when it detonates. Built as a trap for a Jedi you raised specifically for the moment of his submission. You will be unmasked years before the end, not by a Jedi's blade but by your own lightning reflected back into your face, by a man you believed you had already defeated. That warmth you have worn for decades will be burned from you. What is left underneath will be what you have always been. He does not look away. Your most powerful instrument, the enforcer you build from a broken man, the one you spend 20 years convincing that he has no other life available to him, will throw you into that shaft himself. On the night of his son's near death, standing in the throne room you build on the second station, he will carry you to the edge of it and let go. That is how the Sith ends. That is what your 1,000-year plan builds. A father who loves his son. The mask is gone. Entirely. What stands in the warm wood-furnished salon of 500 Republica, in the ruins of a performance that lasted decades, is Darth Sidious. And Darth Sidious is looking at a 25-year-old Padawan who has just recited the specific operational details of plans that exist only in the future and the interior of one mind. And his Force sense, which is the most refined in a millennium, is confirming what his rational mind refuses, that the future has been changed, that someone came back, that his 1,000-year plan has been opened like a document and read aloud in his own sitting room. For one moment, one specific unprecedented moment in 60 years of absolute certainty, Darth Sidious does not know what to do next. Then the twin crimson blades ignite. He does not speak. There is no monologue, no declaration. That is not who this is. Not in this moment. Not when the calculation is gone and what remains is a century of Sith conditioning that knows only one response to exposure. He produces the sabers from concealment in his sleeves with a speed that turns the air into a blur, and he screams. Not words, just sound. The specific sound of a control structure that has never failed collapsing into the thing it was always containing. And he moves. The low table erupts. The refreshment decanter shatters against the wall. The arranged fruit scatters across the expensive floor. A chair folds under the force wash of his acceleration, the real wood splintering along the grain, and the window behind his position cracks from the pressure differential as he launches himself across the room at a speed that most living beings can only register in retrospect. Darth Sidious, Sith Master, Dark Lord of 1,000 years of careful planning, hits the center of the room in a fury that has been building since before most civilizations existed. 3 lightsabers answer him. The first thing Sidious does is go for Qui-Gon. Ben expected this. He expected it the way a general expects the obvious move. Not because it is subtle, but because it is correct. Qui-Gon is the political liability. The Jedi Master who was supposed to die on Naboo and didn't, whose continued existence disrupts the architecture of Dooku's grief, the load-bearing death that was supposed to produce the load-bearing apostasy. Dooku is potentially retrievable. Sidious's calculation on that point is not finished, is still running even now, the gambler's instinct to believe the investment can be recovered. The Padawan is nothing. A young man who knows too much, but young men who know too much have been handled before. None of these calculations survive the opening second. The twin crimson blades are moving before the salon's shattered furniture has stopped settling. 3 meters of open floor between Sidious and Qui-Gon, and he crosses it with force acceleration that compresses those 3 meters into something closer to none. Not a run, not a leap, something more violent than either, a projectile wearing the shape of a man. The speed of it is genuinely shocking. Not shocking in the manner of something surprising, but shocking in the physical sense. The way a proximity blast is shocking. The air pressure of it arriving ahead of the blades. A wave front that most beings can only register in retrospect, if they register it at all. Ben is already there, not moving toward Sidious, not raising his blade in a guard position, not stepping forward in any dramatic presentation of interception. He is simply standing between the crimson blades and Qui-Gon's body, and his lightsaber is lit, and the pale blue of it meets the twin red lines with a sound that is not the high sharp crack of clashing blades, but something deeper, a sustained resonant impact tone, bass and controlled, the sound of an immovable surface meeting a force that expected no surface to be there. Soresu does not look like defense. That is its first deception. It does not retreat, does not give ground, does not flow away from the strike and redirect it. It receives. The Form 3 guard is a closed geometry, elbow near the hip, blade angled to present the smallest possible target face, the body centered and grounded with the specific physical economy of a man who has been running this form for 57 years, who learned it young and spent years in a desert with nothing to refine except the form and his understanding of the Force. The crimson blades hit the pale blue wall, and the wall does not move by a centimeter. Sidious pulls back and hits again, harder, faster, with the adjusting intelligence of a practitioner who has just discovered the parry weight is wrong, too stable, too rooted, none of the give that indicates a defense operating near its limits. He hits a third time, a crosscut from 2 angles simultaneously, the twin-blade advantage that has ended Jedi faster than this before. Ben meets both lines on the same blade in a geometry that should require 2 hands and doesn't. The sound is the story. An audio drama lives in its sound, and what the audio drama captures here is the specific difference between the forms in acoustic terms. Juyo's high, violent, crackling exchange, the sound of aggression expressed through velocity, meeting Soresu's deep, sustained, unwavering resonance. The sound of 2 philosophies in physical contact, speed against stillness, fury against patience, a century of Sith hatred against years of a desert vigil that prepared for exactly this. Qui-Gon and Dooku move to the flanks. This is the geometry Ben planned in the outpost room at 1 a.m, with the Coruscant skyline visible through the narrow window, and his mind running every combat scenario he could construct. Sidious's Juyo is the most dangerous lightsaber form in existence. Against a single opponent, or against multiple opponents he can separate, it is close to unbeatable at this level. The form requires space and momentum. It feeds on the opponent's emotional responses, weaponizing fear and anger, and the adrenaline fracture that happens to most beings when something moves at them faster than they can consciously process. Remove the space. Remove the momentum. Pin the offense against a defense it cannot break, and flank from angles it cannot address. Simultaneously, Qui-Gon takes the left with the broad, sweeping power strokes of his Ataru. Not elegant, not pretending to be elegant, the honest combat language of a man who trained for 60 years and is fighting with everything he has for everything he loves. His strikes do not try to be precise. They try to be present, to occupy space on Sidious's left that Sidious must address or surrender. Dooku takes the right with Makashi. The form is the visual opposite of Qui-Gon's. Economical, almost leisurely in its minimalism, each movement precisely the size required, and not a millimeter larger. Makashi was designed for exactly this situation. Single combat precision against an emotionally volatile opponent, targeting the sword hand, the wrist angle, the specific leverage points that Juyo's aggression exposes in the moments between its own strikes. Dooku has spent 60 years with this form. He is not Sidious's equal in raw power. He is, at this precise geometry, something more dangerous. He is the right tool. Sidious presses Ben and rotates to address Qui-Gon, and the room contracts around him. He is extraordinary. This must be stated plainly, because the audio drama requires it. Requires that the audience understand in the texture of the fight's sound, that what they are hearing is not a walkover. Sidious fills every available axis simultaneously, the twin blades creating a field of danger that expands and contracts with predatory intelligence. He drives Qui-Gon back 2 steps with a combination that arrives from 3 angles in sequence, too fast for normal cognition. He spins on Dooku with a reversal that converts defense to offense in a single motion, forcing Dooku's Makashi to retreat from its surgical positioning into simple survival. And always returning to Ben, returning to the wall. Because the wall will not break, and a Juyo practitioner cannot live with an unbroken wall. Juyo is a pressure form. It requires the opponent to react, to be displaced, to feed the emotional momentum with their own fear responses. Ben gives it nothing. Strike after strike after strike. Meets the same closed geometry, the same grounded center, the same unhurried reestablishment of guard. There is no fear in the defense, no anger, no desperation. Only the specific, worn-smooth calm of a man who has been preparing for this fight across the entire second half of his life, and finds that the preparation was sufficient. Then Sidious changes the equation. The Force lightning comes between saber blows, not telegraphed, not preceded by the repositioning that most Force users require when switching from physical to energy attacks. It erupts from his free hand in the half-second gap between a Juyo strike and its follow, blue-white and violent, aimed directly at Ben's center. In most Jedi this works. Soresu requires precise, sustained concentration. The form is a closed system of continuous micro-adjustments, and concentrated Force energy disrupts the cognitive channel that maintains it. It has broken Soresu practitioners before. It is designed to. Ben catches it on his blade, not deflects, not absorbs into a defensive ward. Catches, receives the lightning on the pale blue surface the way his guard has received everything else, and holds it there for the fraction of a second required to redirect it upward, channeling the energy along the blade's length and releasing it into the ceiling in a burst that blows a section of the ornamental cornice into gravel and showers the room with hot dust. Sidious stops. Not for long. 1 second, perhaps less. The flat, utterly predatory pause of a being that has just encountered data that requires immediate integration. The stillness of a man who has never in his life watched someone receive Force lightning on a blade and redirect it, who is now recalibrating every assumption he made about this opponent from the moment they entered the room. Ben looks at him across the pale blue line between them. I watched you kill the galaxy, Sidious. His voice is the same level it has been since the lift, since the salon, since the word good evening in the voice calibrated to absolute 0. I am not here to die on your schedule. The second lands. Dooku moves. He has been waiting for exactly this, the moment when Sidious's attention fractures, when the recalibration pulls a fraction of the processing away from the right flank tracking. 3 moves in Makashi sequence, each one building on the last. A feint to the shoulder that draws the right saber into a defensive rotation, a following cut that rides the rotation's momentum to the wrist. A third, precisely placed stroke that finds the specific angle between Sidious's grip and his guard and applies lateral pressure to the hilt. Not a cut, a lever. Sidious's right blade leaves his hand. He recovers. Of course he recovers. He is Darth Sidious. He recovers from everything. Spinning the remaining blade into a 2-handed guard and driving a Force burst at Dooku that sends the Count sliding back 3 meters across the debris-covered floor. But the right saber is gone. clattering against the wall 20 degrees off his position, and the geometry has shifted. Qui-Gon takes the space the right blade vacated. His Ataru carries the specific quality of a man who has been pushed back twice and has decided that this is where it stops. Not fury, not desperation, the simple focused decision of someone who has run out of patience for retreating. His strikes come with the full power of his physical training, and 60 years of accumulated force connection, broad and heavy and relentless, driving Sidious's single-blade guard toward its structural limits. Sidious turns to address Qui-Gon, and Ben steps forward. For the first time, for the only time, the wall moves. It is one step, taken with the same deliberateness as every other movement in the past minutes. Not a charge, not a dramatic closing of distance, simply the Soresu practitioner's single prescribed defensive action, the one the form was built around from its foundations, the lock and disarm, available only when the opponent's guard has been reduced to a single blade and that blade is fully committed to a lateral defense. The geometry is exact. Ben has run this geometry in meditation for years with a practice blade in a desert hut, has felt every variation and failure mode and the single correct angle where it works. Sidious's remaining blade is angled 40 degrees outward, addressing Qui-Gon's pressure. His grip is compromised, two hands compensating for the force burst's expenditure. The window is approximately the width of a breath. Ben steps into it and applies the lock. His blade catches Sidious's at the precise rotation point, uses the momentum of Sidious's own guard movement against the grip, and in one continuous motion that has no gap in it for recovery, strips the hilt from the hand. The second crimson blade hits the floor. The room goes quiet. Not all at once. The sound of the impact, the hum of 3 lightsabers still lit, the settling of debris, the crack of something in the ceiling responding to structural stress. But beneath all of that, a specific quiet descends. The quiet that follows when something that has been in motion for a very long time simply stops. Palpatine is on his knees. Both sabers are on the floor, one against the east wall, one 2 meters to his left. 3 lightsabers surround him at close quarters. Pale blue, green gold, the clean silver of Dooku's charged blade. The salon around them is destroyed with the specific thoroughness of a room that was expensive and is now expensive rubble. The real wood furniture in fragments. The transparasteel window spider-webbed from impact pressure, the refreshment tray somewhere in the wall cavity behind him, the arranged fruit reduced to juice and stain on the expensive floor. Darth Sidious kneels in the ruins of his sitting room and looks up at a Padawan who should be 25 years old and has the eyes of someone who has been carrying a 30-year war in his chest and has just at last set it down. Ben deactivates his blade. The pale blue light goes out. The hum stops. He holds the unlit hilt loosely, and he looks at the man on the floor with an expression that the audio drama must carry entirely through voice. Because the expression is not triumph. Triumph implies the satisfaction of a desire, and what Ben feels in this moment is older and quieter than desire. It is the specific, exhausted, undecorated feeling of a thing completed, of a vigil that is ended. You will face the Senate tomorrow, measured, unhurried. The same voice from the lift, from the salon, from the moment he said good evening, and every arrangement fell into its final position. Everything, the blockade, the Trade Federation manipulation, the Sith infiltration, the clone army, the Order 66 protocol, all of it will be entered into the public record, documented, permanent. He holds Palpatine's gaze for a long, still moment, and you will live to see exactly what your 1,000-year plan built. A breath, nothing. He turns to Qui-Gon. His master is standing 2 meters to his left, with his blade still lit, breathing slightly hard, unhurt, alive, present and real, and standing in this room. And the specific quality of Ben's voice when he speaks drops by 1 register, becomes the private register, the one that belongs to the space between 2 people who have known each other for 30 years from different directions. Send for the temple security. A pause. Tell them we have an arrest. The Senate gallery erupts. On the second day, Ben does not witness it directly. He is in a holding anteroom off the lower Senate corridors when the sound reaches him through the stone walls, and the corridor traffic and the 2 security checkpoints between him and the chamber floor. A wave of human noise, the specific compressed roar of 1,000 beings simultaneously arriving at the same conclusion, that breaks over the building like a weather event. He has been in enough battles to know the difference between a crowd reacting to information and a crowd reacting to the confirmation of something they already suspected. This is the second kind. The gallery always knew, at some cellular level, that something was wrong with the Republic. They have simply been given the specific name and address of it. In the following hours, as relayed by a temple aide with a terminal and the expression of a man processing too much too fast, the arithmetic resolves. Viceroy Newt Gunray of the Trade Federation, informed through his lawyers that Darth Sidious is in Republic custody and that his testimony will be the primary evidence in Senate proceedings, begins cooperation negotiations inside 40 minutes. The blockade of Naboo ends before the second sun sets on the planet's eastern capital. Queen Amidala, reached by comms on Naboo, is told that the crisis has ended and that the senator responsible for orchestrating it is in chains 3 floors below the chamber where he was supposed to take power. The audio record of her response contains a long silence that is its own form of speech. The Camino files come out of the archives, or rather, come back into the archives, since the record of the clone army order was placed there under a dead man's name and then quietly removed, and its removal is itself evidence of the hand that placed it. The army that would have grown to 3 million soldiers and been turned against the Jedi, like a loaded weapon, never ships. The construction orders are cancelled. The genetic material is placed under Senate oversight, pending investigation. The Clone Wars, the great engineered slaughter, the war that was supposed to consume a generation and hollow out the Republic from within, does not begin. It simply does not begin. That is the specific extraordinary nature of prevention. The absence of an event has no sound. The Jedi Council convenes an emergency session on the 3rd day. Ben is not present for it. He learns what happened through Qui-Gon, who was summoned and who describes it afterward, in the careful, precise language of a man reporting facts he finds almost too large to hold. Mace Windu conducting the session with the gravity of someone who has understood that I was wrong is inadequate, and that nothing adequate exists, so the only option is to proceed clearly and correctly from this point forward. The other council members, in the specific silence of people revising their models of reality at the foundational level, and Yoda, sitting with his eyes closed for a very long time at the end, before he speaks, learned much, this council has. Much it should have already known. Ben goes to the council on the 4th day, alone, because what he needs to say is not a report, and is not an argument, and is not a performance of any kind. He walks through the corridors he has been walking since he was a small child, brought to this temple and told that this was home, and they are the same corridors, stone and light and the harmonic hum of a building that has stood for 10,000 years, and he walks them for what he understands, without drama, to be one of the last times. He stands at the center of the chamber, 12 chairs, the morning light through the high transparisteel windows, cold and diffuse, falling across the circle the same way it has for centuries. He tells them about the shrine beneath their feet, the Sith architecture in the temple's foundation, built 1,000 years ago and left in place, leaking its slow corruption upward through the stone into every meditation and every council session, and every carefully reasoned decision that somehow always arrived by imperceptible degrees at institutional comfort over institutional truth. He tells them to find it and cleanse it. He tells them this is not metaphor. He tells them about the complacency. Not cruelly, he does not have cruelty available for this, only the specific worn patience of a man who loved this institution and watched it fail and has come back to say what it failed at. 1,000 years of peace had not made the Jedi wise. It had made them certain, and certainty is a different thing entirely, and the difference had cost billions of lives in a future that will not now occur. He tells them about Anakin. He does not tell them the boy falls. He tells them what the falling required, the specific mechanism of it, the way a child who needed to be loved in the full, reckless, non-institutional sense of the word was given procedure instead, an attachment doctrine instead, and a set of rules that told him his feelings were a failure of discipline rather than a proof of his humanity. He tells them this without judgment. It is simply a fact they need to hold and never repeat. What would you have us do? Mace Windu's voice carries the weight of a man who has spent 4 days learning that the question he was never willing to ask has always been the most important one. Rebuild, Ben says, from the foundation, not the institution, the philosophy. The Jedi Order is not wrong in its purpose. It is wrong in its certainty. Begin there. A long silence. Then, from the small carved chair that has held the same presence for 800 years, no, for nearly 9. Stay, would you? The offer is real. Ben feels it as real, the specific quality of Yoda's voice when he means something entirely, without reservation, the ancient warmth of a being who has been asking this question of students he loved for longer than most civilizations have existed. Ben bows his head. The answer costs him something. Not a dramatic cost. He has been carrying this decision for days, has felt its shape in the outpost room at 1 in the morning, has known it the way you know things that are true and also difficult. It costs him the particular, quiet cost of a door closing. Not grief. Something more settled than grief. No. A breath. I resigned once before in a different way, by disappearing into a desert and calling it devotion to a purpose. I will not make the same mistake under a different name. I will not stay and reform this order from the inside, because the inside of this order is not where I can do what needs to be done. At the faces of people he has loved and disagreed with across the 2 lifetimes he is carrying simultaneously. At Mace Windu, who is already holding the weight of everything he got wrong with both hands, which is the only correct response to it. At the others, who are doing the same. I am not a Padawan. I have not been a Padawan for 30 years. What I am is something this order does not yet have a category for, and I think it is better to operate outside the category than to spend the years ahead trying to fit. He removes the Padawan braid. It is a small thing, physically small, a plaited cord, worn at the temple, the traditional marker of a learner's status within the order. He has worn it for precisely 4 days in this body, and for everything it has meant and not meant, he holds it for a moment in his palm. Then he sets it on the floor at the center of the circle, in the space the council has always reserved for the person being addressed, and he bows, deeply, with the full respect of a man who loves something even as he is leaving it. He turns. He walks to the door. Behind him, very quiet, from the small carved chair, our greatest student, always the best of us. He stops in the doorway. He does not turn. Keep teaching, Master Yoda. A pause. That is the best of you. He walks through the door, and the temple closes behind him, and he does not look back. Dooku's estate on Sereno is 3 days' transit from Coruscant, and the 3 of them spend the journey working out the practical architecture of what they are building. It is not a grand founding. There is no ceremony, no declaration, no name chosen by committee. It is 3 people on a ship with a common purpose and sufficient complementary skills to make the purpose achievable, which is exactly how useful things begin. Dooku contributes what Ben always knew he would, and what surprises him anyway, the full weight of 60 years of political intelligence and financial resource redirected from disillusionment to construction. He arrives at each planning conversation with a list of contacts in 30 systems, a private estate large enough to function as both residence and training facility, and a quality of practical organization that moves through obstacles rather than around them. What Ben observes in him, in these early days, is something he had not fully anticipated: relief. The specific, cautious, slightly bewildered relief of a man who has been angry for so long that he forgot what it felt like to have the anger aimed at the right thing. Qui-Gon is the heart of it, has always been the heart of everything, which is a fact Ben has known for 30 years, and can now simply say, without it costing him the world. His living force philosophy, the heresy the temple tolerated and never embraced, becomes the founding doctrine of whatever this new thing is. Not the cosmic force's long deterministic arc. Not the institutional weight of prophetic certainty, the present tense force. The force as it moves right now, through this specific life, and this specific moment, and this specific choice. Ben is the practical one. He always was. He finds them in the civilian sector outpost on the 6th day after the arrest. Shmi is at the window of the small room with a cup of something warm, looking out at a city she is very carefully learning the dimensions of. Not the overwhelming totality of Coruscant, which would break most people who tried to hold it whole, but this street, this block, this particular quality of light at this hour. She is a woman of extraordinary adaptive capacity, and Coruscant is simply the next thing that requires adapting to. She looks at Ben when he enters with the expression of a woman who has been expecting him, and is satisfied that the expectation proved accurate. Anakin is on the floor with a disassembled protocol droid. He has been improving it without instruction and without permission, which is simply what Anakin Skywalker does with mechanical things left in his vicinity. His hands move with the quick, certain intelligence of someone for whom the language of machines is not a skill, but an instinct. And he is humming the tuneless, rhythmic thing he hums when three problems are running simultaneously and the conscious part of his mind has gone somewhere quieter. Ben sits down on the floor beside him. His hands are 25 years old and have no mechanical memory to speak of, but they move alongside Anakin's with a competence that comes from watching and mirroring, from the same attentiveness that has been Ben's primary skill across 2 lifetimes. They work on the droid together for a while in comfortable silence, comfortable in the specific way of 2 people who have a mutual understanding that does not yet have a language, but will. "I'd like to start your training," Ben says, "if you want." Anakin does not look up from the motivator relay he is recalibrating. "Qui-Gon said you were the best." Qui-Gon is biased. 9 years old, blue-eyed, carrying the particular delight of a child who has just received the confirmation of something he was told to expect. "He said you'd say that." Something small and unhurried, arriving without announcement, without the weight of occasion. A smile. Not performed, not offered as social currency, not the carefully calibrated warmth of a man managing his own expression. A genuine, specific, entirely involuntary smile, the first one since he woke up in a young body in a Padawan's room, with 30 years of unfinished business and the sound of his dead master's voice through a door. He looks at the boy. He chooses his words with the full care they deserve. "What I want you to know, before we begin, before any of it, is this. Whatever you feel, whatever's difficult, you can say it, you can feel it. It doesn't make you less." A pause. "The order I trained in would have told you otherwise. I am telling you now, they were wrong." Anakin has gone still. The motivator relay is in his hands, forgotten. He is looking at Ben with those unguarded blue eyes that have not yet been taught to protect themselves, and whatever the assessment instrument is reading, it is reading something it has not encountered before. An adult who is not offering comfort as a tool, who is not performing safety, who is simply stating a thing that is true. "Why are you telling me that?" "Because someone should have told me." Even. Quiet. The weight behind it is 30 years, and does not need to announce itself. And someone should have told you. And I am saying it now while there is still time for it to matter. A beat. Anakin looks at him for one more second, with the full, unself-conscious scrutiny of a child who has decided to trust something, which is the most serious decision a person makes, and which 9-year-olds make with more accuracy than they are given credit for. Then he looks back down at the droid. His hands resume. The humming resumes. "Okay," he says, "when do we start?" The garden is small. That is the first thing. It is genuinely small, barely 20 meters across, tucked between 2 building faces in the thicket district, where whoever planted it decades ago found the one available patch of permeable ground on an entire planet of durasteel and concrete, and simply put things in it. There are 3 trees, actual trees with actual bark and actual leaves that move in the recycled wind channeled between the towers. There is a bench. There are growing things at the ground level that no one has pruned in a while, and that have decided in the absence of instruction to simply continue. Ben sits on the bench and listens to the sound of it. Wind in the small garden. Somewhere distant, birdsong. Actual birds, of some small gray species that has made the building facades of the thicket district its territory and maintained it against all architectural logic. Further out, the city, its constant, enormous, indifferent hum, the sound of a civilization that has been running at this pitch for millennia and will continue to run at this pitch for millennia more, unconcerned with any individual within it. He has been looking for this garden for 3 days, and finding it has taken longer than arresting a Sith Lord, which seems about right. His voice, when it comes, is the private voice. The audio drama's final register. The Force does not undo what has been done. I know this. Years of desert taught me this in every language available to a man who has nothing but time and sand and silence. The dead stay dead, the choices stay chosen. Qui-Gon died on Naboo, in a future I unmade. And the man who stands in my new present is not less real for having never suffered that death, but the 30 years I carried that grief are not less real either. Both are true. Both are mine. The wind moves through the 3 trees. The leaves turn. I am 57 years old, and I am 25 years old, and I am neither, and I am both. I have lived one life fully, and am now being asked to live another. I find I am not, as I expected, afraid of that. I am. A pause. The city hums. One of the gray birds makes a sound from somewhere in the upper branches of the nearest tree. Short, precise, entirely unaware that it is being heard. Grateful. I am simply, unexpectedly grateful. He looks at his hands. Young hands lying open in his lap. Clean. Unwritten. He knocked on my door this morning, the morning that began all of this, and called my name, and I heard the voice of the man I lost 30 years ago. And 30 years fell away as though they had never been, and what remained was this. I loved him. I love him still. I have always loved him, and now I have the time to tell him so, and to show him so, and to build something worthy of the life he gave back to me. A breath. As for the boy, he is 9 years old, and he is fixing a droid, and he will never, as long as I have breath in this body, be alone in the way that matters. He will know he is loved in the specific way, the specific, reckless, entirely non-institutional way, of someone who has chosen him not because the Force demands it, but because of who he is. The wind again, the trees, the distant city. I do not know what the future holds. For the first time in 30 years, I genuinely do not know what comes next. No timeline to preserve, no catastrophe to prevent, no 19-year vigil to maintain in a desert on behalf of a galaxy that doesn't know it is being watched over. The lightest pause. The warmth in it belongs to a man who has come a very long way and has arrived at last, somewhere worth arriving at. I find the gray bird calls again, closer this time. I find that I don't mind. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.